meeting of the Council for the City of Lacombe, April 26th. And we'll call the meeting to order. Joining us electronically this evening is one councillor, Councillor Connick. Are you able to hear us? Very good, welcome. And for those that aren't able to see on their screens, we have several staff members and a guest as well that have joined us. So welcome to everyone. Has everybody had an opportunity to review the agenda? Any additional items we need to consider or changes? Councillor Jacobson?
Yes, can I add an emergent item, please?
Certainly pertaining to?
Yeah, so I would just like to add an emergent item to add to the agenda of the May 3rd Council Committee meeting.
Okay. So a relatively short item. Let's put that, rather than forgetting about it like I nearly did last time, let's put it up front. We'll call it 5.09. Does anyone else have anything? Councillor Uchra.
Thanks, Crucy. I move that we accept the agenda as amended.
Thank you. Anyone else? All those in favor? It is unanimous. So tonight, as you all know, that time of year that we have a presentation here from our auditors, BDO Canada, and we have the main presenter, Mr. Ryan Wachter, is here with us, and I believe that Stephen Sipes is joining us electronically. Before we do get started, I will just remind everyone one more time, because the company that is presenting here, my wife is employed there, although she has no input whatsoever on this particular file. I still want everyone to realize that and be upfront about it. So, Mr. Wachter, if you would care to come up and join us at the table there.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
All right, thanks for having me today. I'm glad I could be here in person. So yeah, I'm going to discuss the audit of the financial statements of the city. I'm gonna do my best to speak as clear as I can through my mask, but if you miss something or don't quite hear me, just let me know and I'll do my best to repeat and make sure everybody hears me clearly. And same thing, if you have questions as I'm going, I encourage you to just ask. Feel free to interrupt me at that point. I find it easier to just discuss it at that point rather than waiting to the end and possibly forgetting. So the financial statements are up on screen and they've been sent out as part of the agenda. So I'll jump right into it to the independent auditor's report. So right after the table of contents there. So the audit report is our report on the financial statements. The very first paragraph states our opinion as the auditors, which is in our opinion that these financial statements present fairly in all material respects for the city of Lacombe. So in a little bit more of a layman terms, it's a clean audit opinion this year. The basis for opinion, the next paragraph discusses that we follow Canadian auditing standards in order to come to our conclusion, and that the city follows public sector accounting, which is the required framework for the city. The next paragraph, responsibilities of management. Ultimately, it is management who's responsible for the preparation of the financial statements, and it is our job to audit the statements. The next few paragraphs describe the audit responsibilities, those of which being that we review the systems of the city, we obtain appropriate audit evidence, that we are independent of the city, which allows us to issue this audit report, and that we've obtained sufficient evidence. So to sum it up, it's a clean audit opinion this year on the city, consistent with last year. Clean audit opinion being kind of the ultimate goal from an audit. So good result there. I'll move you now to the statement of financial position. This is the first statement. This is a snapshot in time. So as at December 31st, what did the city have in terms of assets and liabilities? So cash appears to be down from 17 million to 2 million, but this was largely due to a move to more funds into short-term investments in order to yield some better interest and return on the cash that's held as it's being held for future projects and future reserves. So cash is down about 15 million, but short-term investments are up 12.1 million in the year. Taxes receivable is down from just shy of $1 million to about 800,000. A little bit of a timing thing in the tax receivable in that the amounts are due, they haven't been paid, and it can vary year to year. In the wake of everything last year, it was nice to see a decrease in that taxes receivable number. Accounts receivable has gone up from 4.4 million to 5.4. In there includes 2.9 million of government grants that were received after year end. So it's just a little bit of a timing thing as to when some of the funding came in. And lastly, the last financial assets, inventory held for resale. This is largely consistent of the land projects that are held for sale. There was no sales in the year, which is why that number stays the same, because that represents the cost of that inventory. In terms of liabilities, the accounts payable has come down from 4.2 to 3 million. Again, it's more of a timing aspect in that you're able to pay a bit more bills before the end of the year. You're going to pay out some more after the year end. Nothing major there. Employee benefits and deposit liabilities, again, there wasn't anything significant there. But I'll jump into your deferred revenue, which has gone down from 8.3 million to 7.2 million. So it's gone down $1 million, and that's because the city has utilized some of its grant money that it had received to fund some of the capital projects that were done in the year. So the deferred revenue largely consists of the grants you've received, but have yet to spend, and that's earmarked for a certain capital project. Overall, long-term debt has come down. That's a combination of taking out some debt and paying down some debt. There's 24 million total outstanding. Obviously, it's not all due next year, and the notes can show you the scheduled repayments if you wanted to see that. So overall, the city has 30.2 million of financial assets, which are cash or receivables or things you're going to turn into cash, and it's got $37 million of liabilities, which leaves it in a net debt position of $7 million. Comparatively to last year's $9 million, we've seen a decrease, which in terms of the city and the financial statements is a good movement to have. I will comment that, yes, there is a net debt position, and that is very common in entities that are doing a lot of capital work. And over the past few years, the city has been funding capital projects. And the reason it creates a net debt position is because debt gets taken out to grant money gets received, and tangible capital assets get purchased, which is kind of falls below that net debt line. So you can see your tangible capital assets in the city went from 177 million up to 183 million. So doing some capital work there.
Thank you, Mayor.
Certainly, go ahead.
So just remind us again why deferred revenue is considered a liability rather than a financial asset.
So the deferred portion is considered a liability because there is an offset in cash. That's your asset. And it's deferred and it's a liability because the way the grant agreements read is that if you get the money and you don't follow through with your project, you actually return it back to the province. And therefore it's a liability until either you've done the project or I just paid the money back.
Thank you.
I will move into the statement of operations now on the next page. So this is more looking at, you know, what did we have for revenue and expenses over 2020? And I'm going to focus more on the comparison to the budget than I am to 2019, because the budget's kind of what council initially had thought and management had thought they were going to generate for revenue and expenses. So at a high level, the initial budget was $44 million of revenue. The city came in at $44.8 million. So yes, it was $800,000 higher than the budget. But the first big one to point out is contributed assets. So the city received $3.3 million of assets in the year, which you didn't have to pay for. So that's from development that's going on within the city. The developer will do work. They'll turn over parts of the work to the city to maintain. It shows as revenue. It's a non-cash item that occurs. And that's the first big bump. There's no budget amount because it's very difficult to budget to know how much somebody's going to provide you and what value that's going to be at. The other significant change was in the government transfers. There was initially 12.2 million budgeted for government transfers, which are grants, and 9.4 million was recognized. The large difference there is due to the timing of the capital work. So initially there was 17.4 million of capital work that was budgeted for, which was going to be partially funded by the grants. 14.7 million of work got done during 2020, and as such there was less grant revenue recognized. In terms of significant changes, those are the two major ones. As with any year, there always is slight fluctuations in some of the revenues versus budget, which is reasonable because you can't always assume and guess exactly what it's going to be. But those are the two highlights, and that's why the revenue does show higher than budgeted. Largely was the contributed assets.
So, Ryan, then that probably a more accurate representation of the total of revenue then is like 41.5 million realized in 2020 to a budgeted of 44.5, so about a $3.5 million difference.
Yeah, about a $3.5 million difference, with, if you're looking to explain that, about 2.8 million being you spent less grants. Doesn't mean you didn't get the grant, you just recognized it, but kind of about maybe $1 million difference there. In terms of the expenses, though, the city budget was 37.6 million. I'm going to go through how the budget kind of compares to the cash budget that was transferred, but I just want to note that there's $6.5 million of amortization included in those expenses. So the budget was 37.6, actual was 36.8 million. So we're about 800,000 less than budget. I don't think that comes as a surprise to many people with things being shut down last year. There were cost savings that were taking place, and it kind of reflected through to the numbers there. I wouldn't say that there's one specific thing I can point at to say this was the decrease. It was just a lot of little things done throughout the city to kind of lend down to this 36 point. Leaves the city with an excess of revenue over expenses of 7.9 million. I'll flip you to the next page, which is the statement of change in net financial debt. So I had said the net financial debt actually improved. It went from 9 million to 7 million, improved by 2 million. So this kind of shows how do we go from $8 million of revenue over expenses to $2 million improvement in the net debt position. Well, we made 8 million. There was 14.7 million spent on capital assets. I backed out 6.4 million of amortization. Amortization is just us, the accountant, slowly writing down the assets over time. It's a non-cash thing and a very mathematical type of approach. And then, for example, you take a building and you might write it down over 40 years, but does that represent the value of the building? I can't say for sure, but we need to do something. And then the city also sold some property for $2.3 million in the year, which kind of led to the $1.9 million improvement in the net debt position of the city. So the next and final statement before I talk about a few notes is the statement of cash flows. And this just kind of shows exactly how the cash changed in relation to the $7.9 million of revenue over expenses. I'm not going to go through it in great detail. Really, a lot of it can relate to the timing of your payables and your receivables and when the money came in, but it just shows a little bit more details to where the cash went. I do want to flip you into a couple of the notes. Now, I'm not going to talk about the full 23 pages of the notes, but I'm going to just hit a couple of the highlight ones. So I'll flip you to page 16 of the financial statements, which is note 10. So note 10 is your accumulated surplus, and this breaks down what the city has invested in tangible capital assets, in the unrestricted surplus, and then in your reserves. So your reserves of the restricted surplus, they went from 5.9 million down to 4.8 million in the year. All that shows is that the city did use some of its reserve for various operating or capital projects in the year. And that 4.8 is the funds that are earmarked aside for specific future projects.
While you're on that page, do you have a page 17 in your copy?
I don't have a page 17 in my copy.
That's good, because I don't either. I was just curious if we were missing something or if that's just a numerical.
No, that's just a numerical oversight.
Okay.
And we will get that fixed for the final. Any questions on the accumulated surplus where the city's at with it? If not, I will flip you to page 23, note 16. This speaks to your debt limits as a city. So the total available debt limit per the MGA is that the city could take up to $53.5 million of debt. It's taken 24 million, so well within the debt limits at this time. And the city itself imposes a self-restricted limit being 75% of what the province says. That puts the internal debt limit of the city at $40 million. They've used 24 million, so still within their internal policy here. The last note I want to show you is the budget note, which is note 17. This note kind of reconciles from what was passed by council and presented by management and ties it into these statements, because I'm sure when you passed the budget, you didn't pass the $6.4 million surplus. But the statements show a $6.4 million budgeted surplus. That's kind of the top line here. When a budget happens, obviously there's amortization isn't budgeted for, it's non-cash. We are required under the accounting standards to put it in. And then the city is going to have cash outlays in the terms of buying capital assets, saving money, transferring it to reserves. That has an impact on the budget, doesn't flow through the same for accounting. So this note essentially says the 2020 budget as passed was going to be a $95,000 deficit. Actual results were a $1.6 million surplus. So a little bit of shows you kind of how apples to apples from that very first budget that was passed. One of the big things you'll note that led to the surplus was there was a $2.3 million sale of property. Obviously, there wasn't a budget for the sale of any property, so that's one of the big things that led to that surplus at the end.
Looks like we were also anticipating about let's see, just lost my handy finger note here. In the transfer from reserves, we had anticipated around 4.6 million and realized around $3 million actual. So that's a fair bit of work. I'm just curious if there's a particular project that you may not know what that is, but our CAO might, if there's a particular project, or what is it that accounted for that fairly substantial difference in withdrawal from, or transfer rather, from reserves. Not that it's a bad thing, I'm just curious which project it would be.
So the big one would be the Public Works building. Council had planned for more work to occur in 2020 than we were able to affect in the environment we're in.
Good, excellent.
Exactly, and you'll see that can kind of correlate with that acquisition of tangible capital assets, and that it's also down in comparison to the budget. So those are the highlights from our audit and from the audited statements. At this time, I'd ask if anybody has any other questions on the statements themselves or on the audit process.
Oh, you're getting off pretty late.
Guess it's an easy day then. Well, I'll thank you for having me here today and let me come and present in person. If questions do arise after, the management has our information and we're more than happy to answer any questions at a later time.
We appreciate it. Thanks for coming to chat with us, Ryan. And if there are any that happen to pop up from council, we will certainly see that they are forwarded and addressed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your meeting. Enjoy the rest of your night.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
So as I look up on our monitor here, I do not see our guests that are listed here for.
Said earlier that one
It
was.
said like David Jeffrey, for example, was asking to get in, if that's your meaning for our next
Perhaps I'll just give
presentation, at +5
IT
probably.
a moment there to adjust that. Perhaps they are available.
Yep.
But while they're taking care of that, our item 3.2, which is scheduled for 5:30, so we are a few minutes early, which is a good thing. But I see we've got some individuals joining us here now. We've got an initiative here called the Food Rescue Initiative, being brought forward by Echo Lacombe Association. And we have some individuals joining us, Mr. Stephen Schultz, who we all know, and Russ Gouzier as public member of Echo as well, and Dr. David Jeffrey from Burman University. So welcome, gentlemen. Who will be leading the presentation this evening?
I will be Mayor Creasy, Ross Bussier.
Thank you, Russ. We appreciate it. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Good evening, and thank you, Mayor Creasy and Council, for giving us this time to present the Echo Lacombe Food Rescue Project. As we've talked or have already disclosed, my name is Russ Bussier. I'm the owner of Redo Waste Limited and a project volunteer. With me tonight is David Jeffrey with Burman University and Echo, and Stephen Schultz, Wolf Creek High School and Ecovision and Echo. Most of you have received an introductory letter kind of outlining what our presentation is going to be about. This will hopefully answer some questions. What is food rescue? We took the interest in this project when we heard of someone in High River who had opened a food rescue market. We met virtually with Sarah and gained some information to get started and bring this project to our community. We will be collecting fresh food that is beyond retail shelf life, outdated foods that have to be pulled but retain great food value, and ugly food that is wasted by growers as it doesn't meet the retail requirements. How does it work? food waste will be collected from distribution outlets, producers, stores, restaurants, any operation that is sending food to the landfill that can be rescued and then brought to our central location. It will then be sorted by volunteers and distributed fresh and frozen at our market, following all government-related protocols to anyone in need of food security, including the food bank, who we have been working with and are going to continue to work with very closely and support in any way. And I'll pass it on to Steve.
Thank you very much, Russ. As you all know, I'm part of an environmental club at the high school. We're passionate about taking action around environmental and agricultural issues. In the world today, 30% of food is wasted and never makes it into people's mouths. In Canada, there's 3.11 million tons of food is wasted every year. With the pandemic, people have discovered that our food system is not secure or as secure as they anticipated. For example, 1 in 8 Canadian families has struggled to put food on the table during the pandemic. And over 80, on the other hand, we waste $31 billion in food each year. Locally, in our own high school, 10% of our students come to school without a lunch, and many of them rely on other organizations to get their food. The solution, I believe, is to rescue this food from producers, processors, retailers, and restaurants and make it accessible to all residents of Lacombe and even our students at the high school. And I'd like to say that we at the high school would like to be part of that solution.
So we have amassed financial and in-kind supporters, as well as close to 20 volunteers, some of whom are Berman students and some of whom are community members. We have applied for a number of grants and we're waiting to hear from them. And we are working with the food bank, and we see our service as complementary to them, as they're not involved in a rescue approach when it comes to food, but they're using new food, fresh food that's donated. And they're looking at ways that they can help us out as well. We see that the old Parkland Library building is centrally located, accessible with ideal storage locations, and we believe that it would be a good location for us to pilot this project. And so we're looking at the shipping and receiving area of the Parkland building. We understand it can be closed off and made available. And we're also looking for positive support and promotion from the city towards this initiative using their online social media resources. In our conversation with the High River Initiative, we discovered that once they got things going, the demand and the support were both there to make it happen and have it be viable. So we want to get going so that we can see this grow and make an impact in the city of Lacombe. At this time, we welcome your questions and your comments.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate that. I'm sure there will be some questions from council. Oh, I don't see any hands right now. Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'd like to say I'm fully supportive of this initiative. I believe wasting food is a terrible thing to do. So I certainly am supportive of that. I have some questions regarding the food itself, and you're dealing with it, and liability issues. For example, if there's a chicken or something that comes to you and it leaves there and goes and sits on somebody's counter for 2 days and they get sick, is there any liability issues that come back to you or the city because this was past its best before date?
I can answer that one. I think there's guidelines that are put in place by AHS called the Guidelines for the Distribution of Donated Foods, which we plan on following to the letter. There's also a Charitable Donations of Food Act that covers some of that. And if it's say a chicken that's going to come to us in a fresh form, then we're going to take that bird and it'll be frozen and distributed that way. So we will address every food item that comes to us, and you know, if it's rotten lettuce, we're gonna sort through it and only give the good stuff away. If it's meat that's outdated, it'll get frozen so that it still retains its value and still can be distributed to the public.
Can I follow up?
Sure.
The question I would have then is, so you're gonna train your volunteers then to do that? Is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah, that will be part of it. There'll be, you know, some of us that'll be there, part of this group that we're speaking to tonight, so that we can train all the volunteers, and they'll be monitored. You know, part of this is that we're going to have to put somebody in place so that there's a managerial side, so that there's somebody always there that they can answer the questions of any of the volunteers.
Okay, thank you.
So there was 3 different methods you had planned on securing this, these food items. One was directly from producers, agricultural producers, and one was from stores for perhaps borderline past due items, and the third one from restaurants. Is that correct? So
that's right.
I guess the provision of foods with the dating issue from stores, I mean, that is already done by our food bank now. Do we have reason to believe that there is substantially more than what they are receiving now on that one particular item, or is it just a hope?
Yeah, Grant, the food bank does not accept outdated items. Like any times that they're asking for donations, they want fresh items, you know, or canned goods or stable product. So the food that we're going to be collecting is very different than what the food bank is asking for donations from, because when they get donations from the stores, it's never outdated.
Well, it might not be outdated, but it's very, very close to, which is the same items you're going to go after. I admire the initiative overall, but I see some fairly large hurdles here, and that food volume is going to be one of them. And I'm just not, I guess I just don't fully understand yet the overall business idea of it, because basically what you're planting here is the seed of a business, albeit substantially volunteer operated, which is great. Because I guess I would like a little more of a test situation done so we can verify that this is actually going to work before you get in too deep, because to go out and buy vehicles and buy refrigeration and do this without a system that's necessarily proven in the community seems perhaps a little overly ambitious. I'm not suggesting that there isn't a need, and I think that food ought to be put to proper use, but I'm just wondering if we're not perhaps overlapping some of the work that is done with the food bank, and perhaps losing some efficiency there. So that's a question for me.
I can answer that. We're having a partnership with the food bank, and the food bank primarily targets processed food and extremely fresh produce that will not spoil, like eggs and things that are frozen. So we're taking food that will end up in the dumpster or in the landfill, and we are making it available to any individual in need in the community. And I think we've done a pretty good job outlining that there is a need in our community that's been exonerated through the pandemic. So first of all, it's a partnership. We are working hand in hand with the food bank. And the second thing is there is a more target niche that we're aiming for as far as the food that we're going to be sorting and processing. And then the third thing to address your concern is that yeah, there will be a little bit of overlap on our target audience, but that audience is in a great need, and what they're not getting is a lot of fresh produce because the food bank doesn't process that area. If I'm correct in that, in saying all that, David and Russ?
Yep. And if I could just add to that, at this point, we have a vehicle that is being provided free of charge from a local car dealership. And we have the signage for the vehicle that's also being donated. We're looking at having the fridges donated as well. So we're not looking at a large financial outlay. Right now, it's really the most important thing for us is to have a space. And once we have a space, we believe that everything else will fall into place.
Very good. And they just don't have the capacity at the food bank or the space available. Is that the assumption or the? Okay, thank you. Appreciate it, gentlemen. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So I think there is opportunity because there is agricultural product lines from producers that I know personally have offered their products free as, for example, a surplus of seed potatoes in the spring and the fall, or certain grades that don't meet seed quality but are for various reasons. They've been turned away from donating to the food bank. So with added warehouse space, I think there is further opportunities for the product lines. And I know that all due respect to the food bank, they've turned down because of the capacity of the infrastructure they're building and the volunteers. So I support this because I think there is further opportunity, and I could gladly put you in contact with, individuals at certain times of the year. Just because of the grade of the certain product does not mean that it's worthy to be thrown away. To be quite frank with you, the cold potatoes cattle producers feed them to the cows, so that they're fresh, just all at different sizes. So it's not that they're not capable of for human consumption. So, anyways, yeah, I think you've put your time and effort into doing your homework. I can emphasize with Mayor Creasy somewhat of, you want to set yourself up to succeed, but I think there is a lot of opportunity with different product lines of donations for yourselves going forward.
Councillor Hibbs.
I think Ruben has been trying to get your attention, but I do have something, but just let him go first.
Floor is yours if you want it.
Oh, well. Okay, I'll take it just because you're giving it to me, but Ruben has been waiting patiently. I really want to commend you gentlemen for bringing this project forward. I remember reading that article actually about the High River story and thinking to myself, that's pretty amazing. And I wonder if something like that could happen in this community. But that was just me wondering. You guys are making it happen. So I do, I fully appreciate that because that's what it takes. It takes community members to see something and get behind it and then do exactly what you're doing here. And that's coming to council and asking for city support. And I would reiterate that you're asking for very little city support, really, in the grand scheme of things. I do see this as getting significant community support, and clearly we've seen some of the evidence of that already, and I think as this becomes more well-known that you'll only see more. I think it's a fantastic endeavor, and I'm really excited to see where it goes. Again, this is just a pilot, so I understand some of the hesitations about, investing a ton of money into something that's somewhat unknown, but I also see that this is not a project that has never happened before. You do have templates to go off of and best practice to learn from, and obviously you're going to make some adjustments for our community. But yeah, I guess what I'm really trying to say is thanks, and that I do support what you are asking from the city, and really look forward to seeing what is coming next. That's all.
Thank you. Councillor Connick.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I do support the initiative. I just have a question about the space. Do you guys have a plan B in terms of the space? And the reason I say that is that this council hasn't yet determined the fate of that former part-time regional library. Anymore, for that matter, a future council may have some decisions to make with that space. I realize it's just a pilot project, but it could come to pass that in 6 months from now, that building is torn down, and who knows? I'm just wondering if you guys have a plan B in terms of a space, should things develop as far as that space goes.
Well, we don't have a plan B at this point, but I think that should we get an indication from the city that the space would no longer be available, that we could begin to search for that. Would it be reasonable to ask for, say, a year, and that outside of that year, the city would say, okay, we know that it would be reasonable to take the building back? Or would it be, you can have it until we decide we might need it?
Fair enough. Councillor Hoekstra, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy, and our fellow councillor there. Yeah, thank you for this project. It excites me too. I heard a lot about the Calgary project, and particularly the community kitchens that kind of came out of it in terms of cooking together. My comment is a bit about what we see in our package and your letters of support. I'm concerned that there aren't more letters of support, but maybe that speaks to what Dr. Jeffrey was saying, that once you put some of the pieces in place, you'll see more community support. But I too had expected letters from farmers or letters from producers and more grocery stores, but maybe you had a different plan. Could you speak to the letters of support or the lack thereof?
I can try to speak to that. You know, I've been in touch with a lot of the producers and the grocery stores, but
Russ, can I just can I have everyone else turn their microphones off in the meantime, because we seem to have a lot of feedback. And I'll just have you start again, please, Russ.
Yeah. I was just saying that I've been in touch with many of the producers in the area and quite a few of the stores, and I know we've talked to some of the restaurants. But until we have a space put together, it's hard for them to make a commitment to us. So the space is a very important cog in this wheel. To get, you know, like I know of just one big producer that's west of our community. He has product that he wants to give away, but it doesn't come to Lacombe. It goes to Edmonton because there's nobody in town here that can handle the volume. So I think to get people on board as far as giving us the donations and other businesses understanding what we're doing, the location is very key.
Councillor Jacobson, you're next.
Yeah, I guess Councillor Connick kind of took my comments, so I'll just echo what he said. Yeah, and having heard the presentation, being aware of it on the Echo Board, but having heard the presentation more clearly, I shared a lot of the mayor's concerns. However, understanding that you really are targeting fresh produce that is beyond expiry dates, I feel more comfortable with that for sure. But regardless of that, it's the building where my concern is. I just want to, if the city is going to move ahead with this in any fashion, I would just want to make sure that the wording of the agreement is such, especially moving into a new council afterward, that the hands are not being tied of that council to, to make strategic decisions for that building regardless. So that would really be my only concern on this project.
Was there anything that you would care to add in wrapping up for us tonight? Any of you?
No, I think we've about covered it as far as I feel anyway. So, David, Steve?
I would just like to say thank you very, very much for taking the time to listen to our proposal, for believing in our innovative ideas. And like it's been mentioned, this is a pilot project, and I'm already having individuals in my classes and in our school wanting to sign up to volunteer. I know that David can speak to Berman University as having already gathered a bunch of student and individual volunteers from their community. So the support is building, and I do believe that if we tackle this wisely and proactively, that it will grow and it will be successful, as many of the projects at the high school have been.
And I just want to thank the council for taking the time to listen to us, and we wish you the best in your deliberations.
Well, thank you very much to all of you. We appreciate you being prepared. Do not misunderstand or mistake difficult questions for lack of support or interest, because we admire you taking the bull by the horns here and addressing a very real problem. And hopefully we will get, or you will get great community support. So thank you for presenting this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Very good. So we don't have any public hearings this evening, so we'll move right into requests for decision. The first item up was one that was added for council consideration for an agenda item for our upcoming May the 3rd it is meeting. Councillor Jacobson.
Sure, thank you, Mayor Creasy. So this is something that's been on my plate to bring forward for council discussion for a while here. And that is the issue of responsible consumption of alcohol in designated city parks, as per the change in municipal legislation 2 years ago. The reason I'm not bringing it forward as a notice of motion is that I think it should be discussed in a council committee format, which would allow for a much more free exchange of ideas on the topic. And again, the reason I'm bringing it forward now, I've certainly been approached by numerous people wanting to know what the city's position is on it, given the change in legislation. Because we have no idea how long lockdown situations are going to persist into the summer. I think at the very least, citizens deserve us to have a conversation about it and know exactly where council sits on that. So then, of course, you as councillors too can have that discussion when it comes up, which it inevitably will if we're locked down into the summer. So again, I want to be clear, my motion is not to vote on whether or not we change bylaws about responsible alcohol consumption tonight. My motion is simply to add it for discussion on the May 3rd council committee agenda. So to that end, I'm going to make a motion that responsible consumption of alcohol in designated city parks be scheduled for discussion on the May 3rd council committee meeting agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Jacobson. So to that, do we have available time, reasonably available on the May 3rd meeting?
As you may recall, the May 3rd meeting is currently scheduled to start at 6 o'clock. I would recommend moving it to 5 o'clock if you're to add this item. The original 6 o'clock was set when there was one item on the agenda. This will be the third item, being the fire services review, the pavement management study, and responsible consumption of alcohol, should you add it. And so I would recommend going back to 5 o'clock if you add that.
Right. Unless I'm mistaken, I don't see this being an extremely lengthy discussion, but it's certainly for council to decide. I certainly don't have any problem with it being added to the docket for the May 3rd meeting, with the time remaining the same, but we've been advised that it might be in our best interest to move it to 5 o'clock. Councillor Hoekstra.
I'm fine with the meeting starting at 5 o'clock. Because I was the one who proposed 6. I can make 5 o'clock work.
5:30.
Anyone else?
5:30.
5:30.
Does 5:30 assist you at all or not?
Yes.
Okay, well, let's do 5:30.
Would that be a reasonable compromise? And then I'm not hearing a lot of opposition to it being put on the docket, so is half an hour earlier okay with everyone? Very good. So we do have a motion on the floor to add it to the docket. So I will call the question on that now. All those in favor? That is unanimous. And if somebody would care to
So I did want to add one disclaimer that of course, the other items on that committee meeting have been in the works for 18 months or more. And so the degree of detail that we will have available on those agenda items is not going to be to the same as supporting this item's discussion, but we will get together what we can, for sure.
So thankfully, there's 2 weekends for you to work on that diligently, so. No, that's understandable, but I mean, that for the reasons that he stated with the approaching summertime season and whatnot, I think that we can still have a productive discussion. I heard there was some willingness to adjust the time, if you would care to make a motion for that to keep it clear. Councillor Jacobson.
Sure, I move we change the meeting time of the May 3rd Council Committee meeting to 5:30 p.m.
Very good. Any discussion on that item? All those in favor? Those indifferent or opposed? Very good. 5:30 it is, and a note, please. And then into item 5.1, the audited financial statements. Chief Gowdy.
The audited financial statements has been shared by our auditor, but you do need to approve them as one of your annual duties. So I've included a request for council decision with some highlights. I won't go through the highlights because Mr. Wachter just did those, but I will say that overall the city continues to be in a fairly financially healthy and stable position with the ability to meet its needs and provide services to residents. If there are any specific questions, I would be happy to answer those. Sometimes I find that the statement of operations, the financial statements are not as helpful as a final year accounting would be, and so we've added the Q4 year-end results as well.
Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I just had a quick question regarding the pool and staffing. And the staffing costs were higher than we budgeted. I thought we had the pool shut down for quite a long period of time.
Yes, we did. So you'll recall that in the spring adjustments for 2020, you made adjustments to your budget based on decreased revenue and increased expenses. And this actually ties in well with our surplus discussion later on the agenda. It turned out that some of those initial estimates were, as they were simply estimates, overly conservative in the impact that we would have, or in some areas overly optimistic. And so in that area, we were overly conservative in assuming a longer shutdown for the pool than we actually experienced, and so it shows as an overage. Similarly, with those changes being adopted with your spring adjustments last year, because of the pandemic predictions or predictions to revenue, impacts to revenue, and then the unexpected municipal operating sustainability transfer coming from the province and being recognized in the 2020 year, you actually show a surplus of about $1.8 million, although 1.4 million of it is that operating sustainability transfer, which really is recognized as a surplus only because council took action in the 2020 spring adjustments to reduce your revenue projections and increase your expenses. Otherwise, it would have been much smaller. And in this case, to answer your question, we estimated that it would be closed. I don't have the exact, but say until August, and then we were actually able to open in June. And again, that's not big timelines, but.
Okay, thank you.
So there's an awful lot of information contained in the report. And while I would expect that administration would prefer that we made a decision on acceptance or not this evening, I don't think it's imperative. So if there is some things that you're uncertain about, or you just want further clarification, then we can consider delaying the vote. However, if there aren't, then I suggest that we move forward accordingly. So, Councillor Jacobson?
Yeah, I just had a question for my own edification on the increase in investment revenue by basically double than what was anticipated. Is that due to, actively managed changing of investments, or is that were we increasing our invested amounts, or is that referring to something that one wouldn't think of as traditional investment?
No, I'd say it's two factors. The investments did perform better than expected. The investment vehicle that the municipality was able to enter into through its partnership with CIBC is one that limits financial loss of the original capital, but does participate in some level of upside with the market. And so with some of the market improvement that we saw, they just performed better than expected. I would also say that we were very cautious in our predictions of where the revenue would be with that investment revenue, and based it more on the city's historical performance than the short-term historical performance.
What kind of investment vehicle is that?
I'd have to get the exact name, but it's like a municipal bond index of some kind. It is specific to municipalities, and it's something that actually CIBC is the only one that we found that offers this specific product. And I can get that information for you later.
Councillor Ross? No. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Kotick. Sorry, I didn't see your hand up there in the monitor. My apologies.
Yeah, no problem. My question, CEO Gowdy, I know this year is the first year I've seen this where we do actual to budget reports at the tail end of this audit for each department. Also new this year is the amortization line item. My question is, shouldn't that be kind of an in and an out? Because if you look, for example, at the police budget, it looks like we have a deficit when in fact we had a surplus, but that's all due to amortization. You take the amortization out and it reflects the true number, or at least what I think is the true number. I'm just curious on how that works with that amortization, because I haven't seen that before reflected in here, and I think it kind of skews things a little bit. Maybe that's just me.
So there shouldn't have been any update to the way the amortization is reflected, but you're absolutely correct. It's a non-cash expense, and so it's not a real cost in the way that you've identified it exactly. So the MGA requires municipalities to account for amortization of their tangible capital assets, but you do not have to fund that amortization. So you're able to actually carry a deficit, although municipalities typically are restricted to budgeting for balance. You are able to carry that theoretical deficit equal to the entire amortization of your tangible capital assets for that year. That's not actually good practice to do that, but I haven't seen municipalities that are able to account for the full amortization. It's typically somewhere between ignoring it entirely and funding a portion of it through contributions to reserves.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Thanks, Mayor Christie. Just to follow up. Okay, no, that's fair. So long as people keep that in mind, like I don't want people thinking, oh my goodness, they had a deficit. Well, no, they didn't. And that applies to other departments as well. I think we just have to keep in mind that amortization, isn't a true, not a true reflection, but as long as people keep that in mind, that it's they shouldn't, as you put it, take it, not take it seriously, but just consider it as it's being presented.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. In there, fines, 2019, 276,283, and 2020 is 137,702. Is that strictly bylaw or?
No, that is very little to do with bylaw. That is challenges that were experienced in enforcement by policing agencies throughout the province. And I would have to get a more detailed answer from the police department. The bylaw portion would be, of that total would be
Minimal.
minimal, very, very small. And so I can get more information on if you'd like.
So, given that the financial report didn't really, other than some page numbering, some clerical items, there's no substantial revisions to it. Are you looking for council's acceptance this evening?
We are looking for the approval this evening of the financial statements.
So if someone is so inclined to make a motion in that regard, Councillor Hibbs, go ahead.
Sure, I'm just pulling it back up again. Yeah, so thank you, Mayor Creasy. So as was indicated, it is a clean audit, which is essentially what we're looking for. And so then I would move that council approve the 2020 audited financial statements as presented.
Thank you. One more opportunity for any clarification items. I mean, that's not to suggest that if you come across anything or approached by a member of the public that has some concerns about something, we're happy to get an answer for any questions. Those are public documents. But for our purposes here, if we do not have a lot of other questions, I'm going to call the question for those in favor of acceptance to show their hands now. And any opposed? I believe that was unanimous. Thank you very much. As I look on our board there, I do not see Manager Lapointe. I've got him marked down as.
He is one of the plus twos.
Okay, so he is with us. Manager Lapointe, are you able to hear us?
I am here. Can you make me out?
There, that's better. So item 5.2, the Echo Lacombe use of 5404 56th Avenue. For those unfamiliar with the particular street address, that would be the recently acquired building formerly known as the Parkland Regional Library space at the end of the same street that City Hall resides on. Under community initiatives, if you'd care to walk us through that item, please, Manager Lapointe.
Sure. So this evening, council received a presentation from Echo Lacombe detailing their plans for a food rescue operation. Echo is requesting temporary use of the shipping and receiving area of the city property at 5404 56th Avenue to support this initiative. As you heard, food security is an issue faced by many communities across Canada. Food waste has a significant impact on the environment, while food rescue operations seek to address both the issues of diverting edible food from the landfill and using it to support local families. The waste captured by food rescue includes imperfect produce, groceries approaching their best before date, and leftovers from restaurants. Once collected, this food is redistributed via markets from a central distribution hub. The Charitable Donation of Food Act allows for this redistribution to occur. So several other food rescue operations are operating in Alberta, and Echo Lacombe has consulted with the High River operation to get a sense of scope and glean best practices. I should also mention that many of these initiatives coexist and complement local food banks. Echo seeks to work with a local charity to produce tax receipts for businesses as a further incentive to participate in the program. There are a number of local groups, businesses, and volunteers already pledging with support, and they hope to gain more in the near future once the doors open. When open, the group will also like to access washrooms for use by their volunteers. So once again, Echo is requesting temporary free use of the shipping receiving area of the building located at 5404 56th Avenue for a one-year period to pilot the program. And with that, I'm open to any questions you may have.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. All due respect, I do feel your energy estimates when you have coolers and freezers and so forth to be, I feel that's low. So obviously, if that's 3 times that amount, then the city is responsible for that. Or the difference, if what their budget is 1,500 to 2,500.
So Echo has expressed to us that they would be willing to cover any differential costs we could show between the utilities from it not in operation versus in operation.
Okay.
Councillor Conick?
Thank you, Mayor Christie. So again, like I said, I support the pilot project. It is a pilot project after all. I don't have an issue with that. I just like to frame the motion in a way that should this council or our next council decide something different for that building, that they can be given 3 months notice or something. So I mean, for all we knew, a new council could come January in and say, well, that building's going to come down in March 30th or February 30th or something, that at least we give these guys some notice. I don't know. I guess to tie it up for a year till April 30th isn't the end of the world, but the operational costs in that building are significantly higher than the monies that they're going to pay for energy costs to offset it. So that's my only full steam ahead, but if we could word it somewhere in there that they be given proper notice, at least a month or two, should we determine a different fate for that building.
Go ahead, Chief Cotty.
I think it would be no problem to include a 3-month notice period even. Just to put it in perspective, I guess there's no money for demolition for that building right now in your capital budget. So it would have to be added, if it was something to occur this year, it would have to be added through a special council resolution and funds allocated. If it were to be added for 2022, which I see as probably the nearest normal process for it to be added as a demolition in 2022, it's unlikely that we would start demolition, I think, prior to the end of March or April even at that time, which does give them the full year that they've requested. I think even going in with just a 1 year and saying we'll look for a renegotiation when it's closer to the expiry would be reasonable as well. But I think it's unlikely that you'd be in a position where you'd be forced to kick them out with short notice.
Councillor Jacobson?
What are the insurance implications of having an operator of that building?
So we have talked to our insurer about what that would do, and there is no additional cost to having this temporary intermittent use of it.
And anything with utilities?
There would likely be additional utilities associated specifically with the freezing or refrigeration of the food. Echo has indicated a willingness to cover any costs that we can demonstrate between the vacant utility costs and their occupancy and the utility costs at that time.
Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you. Yeah, so I did have concerns about my intentions of the building are probably leaning towards a demolition. So again, but as was already explained, that's not a process that you just start tomorrow. So we probably, for a year's pilot, I didn't have any concerns about that. I do have a question, however, why the little separate garage part wasn't considered as, home for this versus being in the large building. If they are looking for, garage space, was that just not large enough? Does it not have a washroom? Like why was that not utilized? It seems to me that it would make more sense if it was plausible.
So we currently have some parks functions operating out of that garage portion. So some of the equipment is stored there. Some of the temporary staff will be staging out of there over the summer. And so it wasn't available.
Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I heard the mention of washrooms. We know washrooms are not in that space. So how is the security of the building going to be maintained if volunteers can go in and out of the dedicated area? That would be my first question. And then just quickly on the garage thing, is the garage heated?
Yes.
It is? Okay, because I was gonna say that they would need a heated space, I would guess. But anyhow, that's my first question.
So the unfortunate part about this building for me is council has not really made a decision on what it's going to happen with it. if, and I say if because we don't know 100%, if it gets demolished at any point in time, it just seems a shame that we're delaying that for any entity that happens to be Echo in this instance, and spend $80,000 on utilities and whatnot for another year. Shut it, I'm just saying hypothetically, if we're gonna demolish it, shut it down, quit the bleeding. We would be far further ahead. Renting them a space and giving it to them for a year would cost us less than what the utilities are. I realize that we might not be able to put money into demolishing the building, but that's not to say that we can't stop the bleeding and cut off the utilities and whatnot that we spend a fairly substantial amount in. So we've got some work to do with that. The 1 year thing, as was mentioned earlier, I think by Councillor Jacobson, is a little problematic. I would like it to be either a shorter time frame if we're going to consider that, or give us the option of accelerating that if need be, if it does go to demolition, or it could be an alternate use as well, just alternate use in any event, because that's an extremely large space to tie up because of a commitment over a fairly small portion of it, the garage spaces. Councillor Jacobson.
Yeah, Manager LaPointe, are you anecdotally aware of any other spaces? I know they said they didn't have Plan B, but of any other spaces that that could potentially work out?
Not at the moment. I think that the feeling here was that if Echo could get this started, in talking to a number of other organizations, High River in this case as well, they actually started in one spot and somebody approached them afterwards and said, hey, you'd be much better suited in this location. So it goes back to kind of what Councillor Hoekstra was saying, that you need to get this started and then you'll see the community sort of swell and the support come in that way afterwards. And so the intention here was, I don't think that Echo wants to, has long-term plans. I think they would be flexible as far as I'm concerned, in terms of, if there was a 3-month notice period or something. I think that's certainly something that they would work with. They just want to hit the ground running and see what sort of momentum and support there is for this within the community, because anecdotally, there seems to be a lot, but people want to see a location before they get involved.
Thank you. Councillor Goldson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I have a couple of questions. Demolition has been brought up. Did you get a pricing on that?
Do you remember what the price was on demolition? Yes, I did get a price on it. I believe it's $225 today. Would have to, Director Thompson is on the call. Director Thompson, could you do a quick search for me and see if you can locate that estimated price that we got, or that quoted price for the demolition of the former Parkland Regional Library? Give us that information.
And the other thought, $80,000 for utilities on a yearly basis, $8,000 a month approximately.
I would have to look to see exactly what the utilities on that building are. I don't have it.
Well, that's what you quoted.
Yeah, I did, and that's what they were. That was while the business was up and operating, so I would expect that there would be some more heating and lighting costs there than what, well, a little bit more, but that's approximately what they were. That was what was given us to when we looked over the file initially.
Because how long have we had the building now?
1 year.
Oh, so we'll have it on basis for that. I just think it's, if we're going to tear it down, to spend $300,000 or whatever it is to get $300,000 worth of land, let's don't put them in there. I support the project 100%, but if we're going to do that right away, I would suggest that we would just be making ourselves to look bad if we get them in there and then kick them out. But I would like us to support them in another way somewhere else, if we can.
We noted. Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks for Creasy. My questions were asked awkwardly, but I asked how were they going to keep the building secure if they were going to let volunteers into the washroom areas, and then I asked whether they needed a heated space. Is that why they're choosing this?
Manager Lapointe, can you give us some information on the security question?
My understanding at this point is the washrooms that we were citing may be within that separately secured space. So that back area is a separate rental area. It would be separated from the remainder of the building. So depending on which washrooms were selected, I believe that those are within the separately secured space. In terms of heated, yes, I think the preference would be for heated. But again, they actually ECHO entertained the garage, but right now it is being used for municipal purposes. So that is why they reached into this other space. Their first ask was going to be for the garage.
Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So comparing the square footage that they would utilize versus, and I don't know what the warehouse lease cost per square foot is. What would them numbers, like if you gave them a grant on a per square foot of, what's the square footage and what they're going to utilize? I have no idea what it is. But, and I don't, secondly, I don't know what the cost per square foot is right now. The lease rates, considering the number of vacant buildings. Does it justify better to give them a grant towards lease of another building that is theirs? And, you know.
So I believe that they have requested approximately 1,400 square feet with the current request. I'm not sure if that is required or that's just how big the space was that was cited out. Manager Lapointe, do you have any information with that? Is 1,400 square feet about their required size?
I think they could probably make do with less. Again, that was the space within that building.
Yeah, it's available. Yeah.
So that's what I was going to say. I think you'd be looking at a comparable lease value if you're looking at an industrial warehouse space of maybe $10,000 per year. But I expect what the group would say is, while an industrial warehouse might provide suitable space, it doesn't provide accessibility for the potential patrons, and distribution is much more difficult when you're trying to distribute out of that facility. And so having something that is centrally located within kind of the municipal core has a lot more value in it. I don't know if there is anything to rent like that. You could look at renting them a space permanently, I guess, in the room above the pool that overlooks the pool in the Kinsman Aquatic Center. That might be an easier. Guy, have you thought of that? I'm sorry, Manager Lapointe, was that discussed at all?
Actually, what was discussed prior to landing on this option was use of the LMC kitchen, because there's already a freezer and a cooler in that space, especially with the building being closed. But again, nobody knows, nobody has a crystal ball. And, you know, if that facility is open in 1, 2, 3 months, are those uses really compatible in that space? So that was something that was discussed. And again, a built-in solution with freezers and coolers already in that space. So that may be an alternative as well.
Thank you. Councillor Hoekstra, did that answer the two questions that you had adequately?
Director Thompson, you got your hand up there?
Yes. Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I just wanted to confirm that the quote we received to demolish the building totaled $263,800.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. But throughout Glen Thompson or the whole east side area, there's got to be bays that are like would accommodate obviously restrooms, more of a warehouse setting, because obviously there's going to be trucks and use of a forklift in a warehouse setting is going to be, I think, more practical than a kitchen at the arena, in my opinion. Like, all due respect, it's just, yeah, pallet shelving and coolers. It's not like it's going to be like a kitchen setting. To me, it's like a warehouse of sorting and repackaging and putting into freezers.
So, Manager Lapointe, given that we've had a lot of input here this evening on this, what I would suggest is being taken as a very worthwhile path to take. There's some questions with the building, though, that are a little cumbersome. I'm just wondering if we could not send it back to ECHO and perhaps look for some alternative space that might be suitable for consideration. And then the city can decide at that time whether we would be, it would be in our best outcome to perhaps help with rent or for a period of time, or give them the space that has been requested. It's just a little difficult when we haven't made a positive direction on that space to tie it up for a year. And then, as was suggested, look like the big bad landlord kicking out a very well-meaning group with the curb because we're going to demolish the building. If it went that way, that's not really great optics either.
Yeah, and to be fair, I will say that ECHO would not want to occupy that space and hold up a transaction or a decision like that from council's purview. So I certainly don't think, I think they went into this thinking that, again, this isn't in this year's plan from the city's perspective, and using that timeline thought that there may be a year to work with. So if that is different, if council is feeling different, I think ECHO would certainly understand that.
So I'm not seeing a lot of hands up for motions. I think we'd like to try and find a little common ground here so we can make this work for them. So that's the only reason I'm asking. Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I guess I asked council, though, is it realistic in the next 6 months that we're going to make a decision about that building? And if we're not, then we got to be understanding it'll be another 6 months before the next council will make a decision. So as much as we know we're going to dismantle that, or we would think we're going to dismantle it, isn't there 12 months to just give this organization a seed of a place to start in?
Chief Gotti.
There was discussion about the cost, the utilities cost at the Parkland Regional Library earlier. So I did have Director Pichet review the budgeted number for the utilities for 2021 for the building. And we had budgeted $33,735 for the utilities at the Parkland Regional Library.
So 3,000, because we were expecting them to be a third of the fully operational costs that were presented to us previous.
So I don't have those full operational costs for me, but I know that they did review the actual usage with the previous occupants, and this was the budget that came about.
Very good. Councillor Jacobson.
Yeah, I think the more that I think about this and hearing everything that's been brought forward, I am in support of the program for sure. But I really would actually like, at the very least, the next meeting to see another option for a location, at least brought forward for discussion and financial analysis. As we've heard, just from utilities alone, it would be cheaper for us, as the mayor said, to simply rent a industrial commercial space. So from a financial perspective, it may not make the most, actually it doesn't make any sense that way. And while I agree with Councillor Hoekstra that, maybe nothing gets done in a year, I guess what I'm more concerned about is the potential for unnecessary bias for a next council to make a decision, right? So if you've got an unoccupied building, the only thing you're worried about as a councillor is what's in the best strategic interest of the city, okay? If it's occupied by, frankly, an extraordinarily well-meaning group that's even doing well, right? And it's doing great, but maybe it is not in the best interest. Like you've got a competing interest, a competing bias to make the best strategic decision. So I'm not saying, again, I wouldn't say yes, even after seeing the proposal. I would like to see another location proposal with a different financial analysis put to it, at least to make that decision.
Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Manager Lapointe, the way I understand this is possibly they could have truckloads of produce coming to them. Is that correct? Like I'm thinking of potatoes, for example. If they have a situation where all of a sudden they have tons of potatoes, would they bring them to these people? Is that correct?
I think there will be capacity issues, so I don't think that they will have tons on hand. The vehicle that they're talking about is a very modest sort of van that's been supplied by Lacombe Ford. So I don't know the exact, I'm not a Ford guy. It's one of the, the slightly larger vans that they were looking at using. And again, right now, that group, ECHO, is anticipating that there'll be interest and that it will only grow over time, but you're going to be starting at some sort of lower level to begin with, right? So estimating that over a course of a year is problematic at this point. We can only sort of gauge it on what has happened in other communities. And it's taken them a little bit of time to build that momentum, even though that momentum is there, to get it to where they are now.
So the space that they're asking for would be adequate for them at this time, because they're not anticipating these larger amounts of produce coming their way then?
I would suspect it would be more than adequate at this point. I think 1,400 feet is probably more than what they need.
Thank you.
So we've heard that we would perhaps like to have another option for space and whatnot to be brought forward. Can you make that happen for us, Manager Lapointe?
I certainly will.
Or to at least take the message to ECHO and have them make it happen?
Absolutely.
Very good. Thank you very much. If that is all, we'll move on to item 5.3, the 2020 surplus allocation. And Chief Gotti, are you going to be presenting, or are we going to have our analyst, Janice Craven?
Janice is with us tonight if I need help with any of your questions, but I will be presenting the memo itself.
Very good.
So tonight I will be presenting the recommendations for the allocation of the 2020 operating surplus. I want to reiterate what I brought up earlier in the meeting, in that this surplus, while large on its surface, is largely made up of the municipal operating sustainability transfer that was recognized by the municipality in 2020 in recognition of increased expenses and reduced revenues associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. The City of Lacombe made changes during the 2020 spring budget adjustments in anticipation of the impacts of the COVID pandemic, to have a realistic outlook on our finances for the year. Fortuitously, but unexpectedly, the province sent money to offset those impacts to our revenues, and with them being recognized in the 2020 fiscal year, they show as surpluses beyond your adjusted budget that you adopted in the spring. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are surpluses as in extra money that is available for discretionary use of this. Although obviously council has full discretion on the use of your money. It's not a windfall. So, because of a number of factors, the biggest of course being the $1.4 million increased grant, and the two other largest being the sale of municipal assets of $2.55 million, and the repayment of a debenture associated with that municipal asset of $990,000, that being the provincial building, which was recognized in 2020. And other contributing factors there. Lower goods and services revenue of $500,000 seems concerning on the surface, but that's primarily water and wastewater due to decreased sales. And you'll see that there's a similar lower goods and services expenses of $654,000, largely offsetting the loss of sales, revenue related to sales. There is the increased interest income that was identified by Councillor Jacobson, and we have lower wage and benefit costs of $225,000. We also have other combined variances that favorably combine to $865,000 of positive financial impact to the municipality. These are comprised of various items, but some highlights. You say savings in training, travel, costs of goods and services sold, wages. This says sale of industrial land, but that is a carryover from a previous memo template, so I apologize for that. There was no sale of industrial land in 2020. That's my oversight. And the sale of replaced equipment or machinery, salvage value.
Chief, before we move on, just the second last bullet item on page 1. So increased debt charges because we paid a debenture early.
Yes. So your budget did not anticipate the sale. The original budget does not reflect the sale of the provincial building. When we received those funds, as you'll recall, we paid down a portion of it. We paid down that debenture and the remaining portion of the lagoon covers. And so with those being unexpected or unbudgeted debenture repayments, they show as increased debt charges. But it is an advanced pay down of debt, which actually lowers your debt carrying cost both this year and in future years.
Okay, that makes far better sense. Just the way it's worded there, I'm thinking we had to pay additional penalties or something for paying.
No, debt itself.
Thank you.
Is the charge.
Thank you.
So we are recommending a transfer that is in line with your annual budget and taxation preparation policy, which has some guidance on the allocation of surpluses. As follows: 1.6 million approximately to the general operating reserve, 120 to the police operating reserve, and 50,000 to the community builder partnership reserve. The community builder partnership reserve is a discretionary item that we are recommending that you consider. It was removed in the 2020 budget due to financial constraint. Now, with the surplus arising, we recommend adhering to the original policy, which is $50,000 per year. The 120,000 is an approximate amount that we have worked with LPS to come to. The LPS Chief Bloomhagen, in recognition of COVID-related impacts to their budget as well. And the remainder is to the general operating reserve, which is in line with your policy, and it also earmarks it in an unallocated reserve that's not specifically allocated to something, because the province has indicated that depending on the results of the statement of financial expenditures related to COVID expenses and revenues, they may attempt to recoup some of the funds if they don't find some of the costs to be eligible. And that's why I put it forward. I don't anticipate that to be the case. However, it would be much more difficult to take that money out if it's in a capital reserve or something like that for that expense. It is likely, I would say, very likely, should I be making your recommendations next year to the same group, I guess, then I will be recommending the transfer of a significant portion of these funds out of the general operating reserve into various capital reserves, depending on your decisions in the 10-year capital. And with that, I will open it to any questions or comments you have about the 2020 surplus.
Councillor Jacobson.
Just a question. The Community Builder Partnership Reserve, was that the fund we withdrew from 2 years ago for the Performing Arts group?
Yes.
Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I move that council direct administration to transfer $1,633,540 to the general operating reserve, $120,000 to the police operating reserve, and $50,000 to the community builder partnership reserve.
Thank you. Councillor Connick?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So to your comment, CEO Gowdy, then, so I'm assuming then that you have documented, or you've made a list, so to speak, of COVID-related costs, so that if the province does come to us and say, hey, we want to call some of that money back, you got it covered, correct? Like, that made me a little nervous when you said that, but I'm sure we've got this money accounted for, and we can properly make that claim.
Yes, we have a list of costs that we believe are related and fit within the program eligibility guidelines. The province has stated multiple times that they will not require any documentation. They will just be accepting whatever you say. But the guidelines are fairly subjective. Yes, there's some subjectivity in there. And so our costs that we've calculated far exceed the municipal operating sustainability transfer that has come back from the province. But if I were in a debate mode, I think I could make a fairly convincing case that some of the costs maybe aren't COVID-related costs, depending on how you argue each cost. I think I'm confident, relatively confident, that there won't be any recouping. And if we are subject to that, many municipalities, if not all, will be subject to it. But without guidelines that are very clear, it is tough to confirm eligibility ahead of time. You're kind of operating in this gray zone where they're saying, we'll take your word, here's the kind of things we look for, tell us how much it costs, and then we made a list, and yes, we have it fully allocated and what the costs are. Without a verification by the province, I don't have 100% confidence, I guess, that they're all considered eligible costs. That's the only reason I hedge.
That being said, I think council appreciates the fact that that's documented, because, well, that sounds good in theory for the province to suggest that. I think that blank check is somewhat unrealistic, and I would hate to see that when the program comes due and the parameters were not necessarily nailed down, the province is inundated with hundreds of millions of dollars worth of bills that the generosity might wane. So it's nice to have the backup.
Yes.
With respect to the operating reserve transfer allocation, is there any additional input? We're all good? You're good, Councillor Connick? Okay. I will call the question then. All those in favor? And I believe that was unanimous. No objections, thank you. And in the same financial vein here, we've got some spring budget adjustments, item 5.4. Once again, Chief Gowdy, you're up.
Thank you. So we've itemized the proposed spring budget amendments. Of course, every year after passing an initial budget in December of the year before, administration and council meet in the spring to go through potential adjustments that have arisen since adoption of that budget. There are typically a number of amendments, and this year is no different. So I will highlight and give a brief overview of the proposed changes so that you can ask questions if there is any. Overall, we are proposing or we foresee a decrease in total operating revenues by $7,451. The changes are as follows. an increase in the investment revenue of $100,000 in recognition of our overly cautious approach in past years, as highlighted earlier by Councillor Jacobson's question. A decrease in the gas franchise fees of $39,000. That was information we received from Fortis and passed to council at our last council meeting. An increase in the education tax amounts. That's the education requisition handled on behalf of the province. $19,000, approximately $100. Decrease in the grant in place of taxes. So this is the program whereby the province compensates the municipality for the tax-free status of provincial buildings within the municipality. And of course, they have, as you know, reduced that 25% one year and then 25% again this year. And to be perfectly honest, we just missed this in the budget. We knew it was there, but we hadn't made the change for the further 25% reduction. A decrease in our tax penalty revenue of $95,000. This being the reduction that council passed in December of the penalty from 10% to 5% on July 1st outstanding taxes. A decrease in the MSI operating grant. An increased contribution to the airport instrument flight rules approach project of $5,500. They have received further costing of that project. An increase to the regional wastewater contract fees of $58,000, and that's due to the commission adopting their budget, which includes an inflation component. A insignificant decrease in our transfer reserve, and then an increased contribution to arena operations of $11,550. That's an increased revenue there. Expenses have been reduced by an estimated $24,000 approximately. An increase to canceled taxes, $12,000. An increase to the education tax requisition corresponding to the earlier $19,000 that I mentioned. A couple of insignificant ones due to potential requisitions. Increase in upgrading and replacement for information services. And I have to confess, I actually can't recall what that one is, so I will come back to that. An increased building rental cost for the fire department, this being the second year of full cost. There is an increase, and we did not reflect that in our original budget. Increased other professional services to establish the IFR approach project. That's $11,000, as with the corresponding $5,500 coming from the county, as discussed for the revenue side.
Chief Cody?
Yes.
So this line starts out at expenses have been reduced by such a volume, and we've got increases. That's just overall? They've been?
Yes, overall, they have decreased. Okay. Overall, the expenses.
Once again, a wording issue. I'm reading this, I'm thinking, how are costs reduced by increasing the dollar amount? Okay, thank you.
There is an increase, $150 increase there. The increase to insurance of $9,000. The big decrease, of course, is the speed safety assessment of $46,000, as well as a loan payment, which I'll get to later for the provincial building, which I mentioned at about $85,000. There is an increase for geotechnical investigations for our own capital works project of $15,000, and then various increased electricity charges, utilities charges, and we had accidentally included the operating cost for the electronic sign capital project, originally proposed by Councillor Gullickson in the budget, and of course that did not go ahead, and so we propose removing those costs as well. Overall, the net impact of these budget adjustments would be a decrease to the city's financial requisition, tax base, tax requirements of $16,366. Concurrently, since we are talking about adjustments, we have some minor capital budget adjustments that we have proposed. That being the removal of the Aquaplex boiler replacement project at $35,000 due to a recent inspection and assessment of that boiler. The purchase of the advancement of the purchase of the police 911 recorder. It was scheduled for replacement next year, but this failed prematurely. and an additional $20,000, unfortunately, for the police server upgrade, partially due to the need for some additional capacity for a program they're running, but also just because of the cost of that kind of information technology infrastructure continues to rise in the emergency services area. Overall, these would be an additional $29,000 of funds proposed to be expended from the general capital reserve.
Thanks, Chief Gotti. Don't get me wrong, I mean, we're in an overall pleasant situation. I find it odd that when we suggested we've reduced expenses by $24,000, when in fact, I don't know if I can really agree with that. We didn't do a lot of stuff. I mean, there's $10,000 for the sign that wasn't done. There's $85,000 loan to the provincial building. Well, it's good. It's because the debenture was paid off. So I mean, that's not really an expense saving. If that was already allocated in there, by the time you take those, in fact, we're probably over.
I'm not sure I follow entirely.
Well, I mean, just on that one item, it says we got expenses have been reduced by $24,000, say, and the decreased loan payments for the provincial building of $85,000. Well, the only reason we didn't have those payments is because the debenture was paid off. So it was already just paid through a different venue. The capital amount, I mean,
so these are just proposed adjustments to the budget. This isn't, I guess, us saying, look at how good administration reduced expenses.
Right.
These are.
And that's why I didn't want to make it sound unrealistic. It's not that this is a bad job, it's just, and a couple other ones, building rental costs for the fire department, that was a fairly clearly laid out contract. Why do we find it necessary to have that kind of adjustment here?
Because we missed the increase on the original budget.
Thank you. And the final one, the professional services for the IFR project, an $11,000 adjustment there. And there is a increased contribution on that same project of $5,500. Is the $5,500 included in the 11,000, or is that in addition to?
The $5,500 is half of the 11,000, being the county's contribution towards that project, so it is included in it.
And Director Thompson, is that a worthwhile project?
I'm sorry, Mary Creasy, would you mind repeating the question?
I was putting you on the spot here. We've got an increased allocation for the IFR project at the airport. And given your recent change in operator status, I was curious if that was an appropriate upgrade to our airport.
I could speak personally and professionally. I think professionally, Director Duke would be able to comment on that, but certainly I enjoy flying.
I know that was a major accomplishment for you, and I just said, why don't you get an opportunity to highlight it?
Very good.
Ross.
I think, Mickers, I could allude to that a bit being on that airport committee. It allows flights, for example, AHS twin prop planes to fly in inclement conditions as an option, if not landing in Pinocchio. And it allows a lot more options and opportunities for the airport for basically aircraft landing in inclement weather conditions without having to pick other options outside of the cone.
At nighttime too.
Yeah. Would that be a better way of putting it, Jordan?
Yeah, certainly. It would be a published approach. So so then there's a set of rules that pilots can follow when landing that keeps the pilots and the general public safe in less than ideal conditions.
Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I realize the order of the agenda dictates some things, but these spring adjustments do not take into account the expense for the social master plan that would normally have been in there, right? And now we're not doing it at 41.
That's correct.
So you purposely did not put them in the like, because if the notice of motion wasn't there, then it should have been one of the reductions in the expenses, would it not have?
There's actually just a financial piece to that. It was accrued in 2020, and so actually it will show as a credit potentially should your notice of motion not proceed.
Got it.
Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, I just have a question, and I guess I would seek guidance from council as well as administration. That let's first ask, at this point, is it still possible to add an amendment to the spring amendment, or spring amendments? Like, could we decide to add something tonight to that list?
Yes.
Okay. I would like to put it in council's ear that potentially we could deal with it tonight, or potentially this is something that should come at a later date. But we have talked about this in the past, and we talked about business license fees. And given that we have the surplus that we have, that this may be an opportune time to revisit our practice of charging business license fees, in that I think that there's room to consider potentially not collecting those further. So we would in fact be even refunding those collected this year, and then going forward not having business license fees. Still business licenses, just not the fees that go with that. And one further tweak on that would be, I would actually like to see us go forward with a process that's like how we do animal licenses, for example, where it is a one-time fee, and then that's for the lifetime of your business unless things change. And I guess I would just want to gauge council's appetite as to whether that would be appropriate for tonight's spring amendment, or if there's not the comfort level, but perhaps the support for talking about that in the future. I think that that's another way that we can signal, not only this year, given obviously the challenges that businesses are facing, many businesses are facing, but I think also going forward, I think that does signal again to the business community that this community is very, open and welcoming to businesses, that we really want that to happen in our community. And I think for the amount of money that we're talking, it does have an impact, but again, I would just reiterate that I would expect that would be offset by our surplus and not now downloaded onto the taxpayer as far as adding onto property taxes this year, because that's not what I want to see. But I guess I just put that out there for comment. Sorry to kind of drop that bomb on you guys. But again, like I said, we have talked about that in the past, so I guess I'd be curious as to what you have to say.
And certainly there's some interesting points on both sides of that. I think that it probably does warrant some discussion, maybe at a later date. I'm not necessarily sure that has total bearing on the allocations this evening. It might be a little premature to add an item of that magnitude. It's 85,000.
The 2018 total was 220,000 made up, and that's the most recent data that I can pull up easily.
Oh, so substantially more than I was saying. It was 85,000 for some reason. But anyway, 220,000, that's a fairly major adjustment. I think that there is some validity to what you said about lending them. I think it might be a little more trickier, a discussion for refunding when we've already incurred the costs of collecting them and levying them. That's a bit of a quagmire, but it's certainly something we could consider. But in a situation like that, then that would basically be recognized in the following year's deliberations as a credit, then would it not? If they weren't going to be charged any longer, if it went that way.
You could do it either way, but a credit doesn't do the business potentially a lot of help if you're not charging them in the future. You have to apply it to their taxes maybe. So yeah, you could do it. Could do it as a credit.
So yeah, I guess what I'm saying is, without the information here laid out, what it's cost us to generate those, what exactly business licenses are intended for and what not to do, and some background information. Personally, I think it's a little bordering on irresponsible of us to make a decision over $250,000 this evening without having all the information before us. That's all I'm saying. But certainly up to council's direction if they would like to make that decision now or receive some information and go through that at a future date. Councillor Connick?
Thank you, Mayor Christie. I support the idea, but I would agree with you. I think it needs to be done at a later date because I'm a little confused by that number. To be quite frank, I thought it was even quite significantly less than $85,000 because I can only remember when I was a business owner, I only paid just slightly over $100 every year. So I'm a little surprised by that number, that $200-some thousand number. Maybe yeah, an idea worthy of further discussion. I'm not so sure we should cross that bridge here tonight.
And Les Craven, are you still on board here?
Yes, I'm here.
Do you have the ability to verify that number for business licenses?
The budget for 2021 was 187,500.
Thank you. And the previous year collected was, what was the grand total there?
I'll have to look that up.
Okay, not a problem. It's just a curiosity thing more than anything, but it's needless to say it's substantially more than obviously than two of us thought that it was. So in any event, it's still a substantial number. So anyone else's thoughts on entertaining an adjustment for that this evening? Chief Gotti?
I just wanted to confirm with Councillor Hibbs that if that were the direction, I am taking your proposal to be that any reduced revenue from business licenses would be instead shown as a revenue coming out of the operating reserve that was just topped up by the surplus. Is that an accurate?
That is exactly what my proposal was, yeah. So it would be a net zero in the end as far as the books go, but obviously money has to come from somewhere. I'm fine with the feedback that I'm getting that maybe tonight is not the night, but I would really like to have this discussion. So I guess I'm not going to make a motion necessarily as to that, but I don't know, does administration require me to take a further step at a later date to make that happen? Or is that something that you would be considering potentially to bring back on your own, I guess?
And given that we have discussed it in the past, I'm not going to suggest that it has not been a topic. I mean, certainly it's been discussed prior. Is there an appropriate time when we could do it? Chief Gotti?
So probably the best time, it doesn't help with past refunds or anything, but would be during your summer pre-budget direction workshop to decide whether that was something you wanted to do if you're looking at 2022. If you're looking for a refund of like something more immediate, I would say probably a notice of motion this evening would get it on for discussion on the 10th potentially. And it could even be a budget adjustment at that time if that was your preference. But those would probably be the best two ways to bring it about.
Okay. Thank you.
So I'll leave that in your capable hands should you decide to make the notice of motion. We've got ample time to do so.
Yep.
For the next one, and regardless, that's fine if you choose to. But it will certainly be a discussion point at budget deliberation time
for 2020.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Oh, you got Connick.
Councillor Connick.
Yeah, I'd like to see us add the demolition in. No, I'm just kidding. I'm prepared to make the motion. that council approves the spring budget amendments as presented. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on that item? Anyone? All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you very much. In line with the financial items, we have our tax rate bylaw 489, which is item 5.5, Chief Gotti.
Thank you. Before you is your tax rate bylaw. It is an annual requirement under the Municipal Government Act. It's one of the few required bylaws, but it doesn't, that a municipality actually must pass under the Municipal Government Act. And I have had the opportunity, I'm just trying to find my place, had the opportunity to become more involved in the development of the mill rate and the tax rate bylaw with this year's process. And I'd say unfortunately, I have come across a variance in the way that the taxes have been calculated in 2020 and 2021. This is a variance from your annual budget and taxation policy. Section 16 of that policy is titled Revenue Neutrality. And it reads as follows, and I'm sorry for the very specific language here. The city's overall municipal tax revenues shall not increase automatically with market assessment increases in an effort to protect ratepayers from dramatic shifts in property taxation due to annual market value assessment changes. The general municipal tax rate for the municipality shall be adjusted to ensure revenue neutrality. Increases to general tax revenue shall be limited to new development and construction, and tax rate increases approved by council. And so this has not been followed in 2020 and 2021. Instead, the revenue neutrality requirement was actually imposed on both new assessment and the market assessment within the city. What this means, it has no impact on your budget. It has no impact on what you've said you're going to collect. The administration has collected exactly what council has adopted as a tax rate every year. So there's no legal issue here. What it really means is it's a variance that is to the favor of the ratepayer, in that the municipality ought to have increased its overall tax collection more than the bylaw that you passed did increase the municipal tax collection in 2020 and 2021. So I'll have more information for you. Unfortunately, this just came out as we were going through the final tax bylaw here, probably on Monday. So we'll have more information for you at a future council meeting. It does not affect your adopted capital plans, operating plans, budget, or taxation in any way. So there is no actual impact. This is a theoretical deviation that has occurred. It's a real deviation that has occurred that has created variance between the real world situation, the bylaw that you're presented with today, 489, and this theoretical policy compliant one, which rather than raising $15.1 million would raise something slightly above that. So there'd be slightly more money for the municipality to provide services to residents. And of course, residents face a slightly higher tax during that time. So it is a variance that I discovered. It does not have a real world financial implication to you at this time, although it does affect the way the municipality has calculated its tax rate bylaw. Future years will be calculated with the revenue neutrality condition imposed only on the market assessment, not the market assessment and new development. So with that, premise. And again, I'm happy to discuss I don't have the normal preparation. And so if you'd like to discuss this, I guess we'll possibly go in council there in camera, just so I can speak more freely about it, because I haven't had the chance to go through it as in detail as I'd like.
Fair enough. We appreciate bringing it to our attention. If I could just ask one question with respect to assessment base.
Yes.
I see that overall we've got around about a 1% reduction. So does that, is that an aggregate total that includes the pool of existing residential assessment and new that was added within that year period as well? And it still went down overall? Or
no, so the assessment base is what you might call a market assessment. And so that's the existing properties went down by that 1.8%. It does not account for the new properties that came on. And so using this as the case, if the municipality increased by 2% because of new growth, if it got 2% new growth, and that were consistent with the portfolio of assessment base that the municipality had, like the split between residential and non-residential, then the overall assessment value in the municipality would actually increase by 0.2%.
So for those people I'm speaking with respect to residential assessment, I'm sure it is where we had a few phone calls and people that, as we do every year, over tax assessments, and some of them were higher than previous years, in some cases rather significantly. But yeah, we see that overall, they in fact reduced by 1%. So what can we tell people to help justify in those areas where that reduction did not take place?
So yes, unfortunately, every year, despite your direction to give a very specific tax increase, 1%, say, each resident or business does not see 1%, or if they do, it's entirely coincidental. It does fluctuate, and unfortunately, property values are used as a fairly crude proxy of service provision towards people, and so they are an approximation at best. What happens when you see significant increases typically is that there was a number of sales of homes within your neighborhood of directly comparable homes that sold for substantially higher than the assessor would have previously expected those homes to sell for. When that data comes through, he is legally required to adjust the assessment values for the homes in that neighborhood to be within 5% of the sales price, the aggregated sales price of homes in that neighborhood. And so unfortunately, because of the variation in the real estate market, and Lacombe is a fairly low sales volume area, a few sales in a specific neighborhood can, skew isn't quite the right word, can significantly shift the tax burden within the municipality from might be one neighborhood to another, sometimes it's one tax class to another. What you don't hear, of course, is for every person that sees a 5% tax increase, there are 5 others that had a 1% tax decrease, and they don't call and say, hey, well, that was great that my tax went down. And that is an important thing to note as we're going through here. We have some example properties. I think we have some example properties here. Yes, we do. So that is an important thing to note, and it goes to the core, actually, of the issue that I raised at the first, is that the typical property in Macomb, both residential and non-residential, will actually see a slight decrease in the real taxes that they pay this year. And so that's being subsidized by that growth of new property. Although you have resolved to have a 0.8% tax increase because of the way that market revenue neutrality has been applied across the entire assessment base rather than just market assessment base. It actually causes new properties to subsidize existing tax rates rather than adding to the municipality's assessment base, as you would expect it would. And so you're seeing this $380,000 home, which would be something typical in the Elizabeth Park area or the Henry's Landing area, would actually see a slight decrease of about $5. Nominal, certainly, but when combined with the inflation that occurred between 2020 and 2021, it does start to be fairly significant in terms of the overall impact to the financial health of residents, as much as municipal taxes affect financial health of residents. So you are split approximately 75-25 with the taxes that you raised, the $20 million of taxes, about 15 million are for municipal purposes, the other 5, of course, for provincial purposes, being education, affordable housing, and the designated industrial requisition, which takes designated industrial property tax from municipalities. So we are recommending first reading. Again, the variance from policy that I've identified has no bearing on this first reading, or whether it's valid, or the second and third reading can proceed, or any bearing whatsoever. It will not require a change in your practice. Just highlighting that there has been a variance in the methodology for calculating the tax rate. It was not directed by council. It does change. It lowers somewhat the amount of taxes that you theoretically ought to have collected in 2020 and 2021. Again, not under collected, and all your capital plans are built on the budgets that we've adopted and that are funded, and everything is good there. But the municipality could have had additional revenue coming in through additional taxation on its residents. No, there's no free lunch, of course.
Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll make the motion that council give first reading to bylaw 489.
Any process-related questions for Councillor Hibbs?
Yes, I realize this is first reading, so there's no room for debate, but I do have a question. So this is essentially setting, I guess, the mill rate, for lack of a better word, but I noticed in the past, for example, we had deviated from our collection date as far as when taxes are due. I noticed in this bylaw, it doesn't mention, the date specifically that taxes are collected, just that this is what will be collected. And I'm just asking, what was that bylaw that we somewhat recently set the penalties and the collection date? Because related to this subject, I would like council to revisit the idea of, again, deferring property taxes until December. And so while I understand that doesn't necessarily go in this bylaw, it's a related bylaw. So I guess that's why I'm bringing it up at this point in time.
I think it is relevant. Let me just think that through. So bylaw 379 is the one you're referring to. It is the, it's a bylaw to authorize tax installment payment plan, the penalty, and the dates for payment of the taxes. If you were to modify the penalty amounts or dates, that could have an impact on your budget. So right now, typically the municipality estimates approximately $220,000 for penalties on tax payments. And in 2021, because of the reduction to cut that main penalty date or penalty from 10% to 5% on July 1st, we've reduced that by $95,000 to $125,000, I think. You could have, depending on your decisions there, a further impact on that $125,000 if you correspondingly reduce the penalty or defer the deadline, just so that you're aware.
Anyone else? With respect to first reading of bylaw 489. All those in favor? And that was unanimous. Thank you. Anybody see, have a desire to move to second reading or not necessarily for tonight? Very good. Next item up then is item 5.6, the budgeted capital replacement, specifically for a grader. And Director Thompson, if you could take that item, please.
Good evening, Council, and thank you, Mayor Creasy. Tonight, administration is asking for Council's approval to proceed with the purchase of the new grader included in the 2021 capital budget. The roads manager publicly advertised an invitation to tender on the Alberta Purchasing Connection website, the City of Lacombe website, and the Lacombe Express city pages per the city's purchasing policy. 3 vendors submitted bids, and each were scored by operators based on the scoring matrix listed in the tender documents. The scoring resulted in a 3-way tie of all bids. However, operators prefer the purchase of the John Deere unit from Brandt Tractor Limited as it scored the highest in the product specifications, warranty, and assessment category, as well as being their overall preference for the operations of a John Deere unit. Brandt's bid price for the John Deere grader was $312,178, slightly higher than the city's $310,000 budget. However, the salvage value of the existing unit more than offsets this slight overage. The $85,000 surplus from the sale of the existing grader unit will be returned to the fleet reserve. And tonight we are asking for Council's approval to purchase the unit as described.
Thank you, Director Thompson. Just to be clear then, the dollar figure was kind of a wash in this item, but the operators preferred using the John Deere grader as opposed to the cattle. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Keep going.
I believe that is not the only factor. Is the existing grader also a John Deere?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we have 2 existing graders. One is a John Deere, and the other one, which will be sold, is a Cat, and that's the Cat is the older one.
So having 2 of the same brand does seem to have some minor improvement also.
Saw some hands up over here, Councillor Hoekstra.
I'll move that council approves the purchasing of the 2021 John Deere 770G motor grader from Brandt Tractor Limited for $312,178.
Thank you. Councillor Ross?
No, it's fine. I was going to do the same.
Similar? Okay, thank you.
Just sorry, all due respect. I just have one question to administration. Like, I guess different brands also recognize trade placement value down the road. Like, I'll be biased as, and farm equipment, John Deere typically has a retention of trading value versus other non-markets. And as a Cat may have a history of better trading value. Is that ever considered in your assessment as to future trading value, or is that irrelevant?
I would have to talk to the manager of fleet to see how he considers that, but I know in this particular instance, we were pleasantly surprised to see a retention of value of nearly 30%, maybe over 30% with the original purchase price of that grader back 15 years ago. So certainly, I think it is important to consider that trade-in value. Like, we are seeing significant salvage value that's offsetting the cost. And so that is something we'll make sure to be considering.
Like, it only makes sense to have 2 the same. Like, that makes sense. But just replacement value, or did they demo the Cat and the Komatsu, the operators too as well, or in their decision, or they
don't demo, we actually have one already.
Not a brand new one. Like, they could have demoed a new one for X amount of hours, but dealership is what I'm trying to say.
Director Thompson, do you know how many units they were able to demo in this particular procurement process?
There were the 3 units, a John Deere, a Cat, and a Komatsu greater unit.
Oh, awesome, good. That's fine, sorry.
Thank you. Anyone else? Who made the motion? Councillor Hoekstra, thank you for that motion. If there's no other input, I don't see any more hands. All those in favor? Thank you. And Leonard Teal is with us as well. We've got item 5.7 before us next, the land use bylaw 400.34 on a site-specific use. Leonard Teal, would you care to take that item, please?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Good evening, members of council. The bylaw 400.34 has been prepared in response to a request by the registered owner of the blue collar garage site in the Len Thompson industrial area. And the request is to consider adding animal services as a site-specific use on lot 19. That's the sole property owned by the applicant to accommodate a business that's interested in locating in one of the bays for dog grooming. The other uses that are in that district to relate to animal services include veterinary hospital and veterinarian clinic. Administration is recommending first reading of the bylaw to move it forward to public hearing, with the recommendation that the public hearing be held on May 25th, after the long weekend on 2021 on the Tuesday at 5:30 p.m.
Thank you. Anyone have any input on this item? Councillor Gullikson?
I'll make that motion that council give first reading to bylaw 400.34 as presented.
Thank you. Anyone else? All those in favor? I see none opposed. That's unanimous. Councillor Jacobson?
I move that council schedule a public hearing for bylaw 400.34 at 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday, May 25th, 2021.
Thank you. Everybody's okay with said date? All those in favor? And that appears to be unanimous as well. Leonard Teal, you were so convincing with that, it went through the record time.
Thank you, Your Worship.
And next up, Chief Gotti, we've got item 5.8, the Caris Village property tax request. Could you take us through that item, please?
Yes, I absolutely can. So the Caris Village, if you recall, was given a tax deferral of their 2020 tax deadline. Council had chosen to defer the deadline for all city taxes to December 30th, 2020, rather than the original deadline of June 30th, 2020. Caris Village requested actually a reduction in taxes, but was granted instead a deferral of those taxes from December 30th, 2020 to June 30th, 2021. What happens with that deferral is that June 30th, 2021, the Caris Village Housing Society of Central Alberta owes both a significant portion of their 2020 taxes as well as their 2021 taxes, resulting in a bill due that date of approximately $270,000, I believe, $276,000 is the number. They have requested that a portion of the 2021 bill representing a maximum value of $135,000. That is the portion related to the unoccupied and unsold or unleased units within the Caris Village. They've requested that those be deferred, the collection of those be deferred to December 30th as well, from June 30th. So on June 30th, they would be paying the deferred portion of their 2020 taxes, the occupied unit portion, the leased unit portion of the 2021 taxes,
And then December 30th, they would pay the remaining portion of their 2021 taxes. Their 2021 estimate is approximately $178,000. All of that includes an estimate of their supplementary assessment, which has not yet been calculated. And $135,000 of that is their referred maximum deferral related to the vacant units. I say maximum because they were able to lease additional units. They've indicated that they would pay that tax right up front, and I have no reason not to take them at their word. The financial implications here, I have laid them out. There could be some minor costs associated with the city remitting the provincial portion of the taxes ahead of collecting them from the Caris Village, and there is a theoretical only loss in a late payment fee. And so I've laid that out, that in theory, if the Caris Village decided, even if council turns us down, we're still not going to pay until December 30th, there would be approximately $17,000 of penalties associated with that decision. I've talked to the board of directors. They will not be doing that. If you turn down the request, they will find a way to move their finances around. They're not going to incur those penalties, so it's a theoretical loss. I have a long-standing and important to me history of recommending only accepting requests for property tax deferrals or reductions as information, and so I would advise the same here. However, should you choose to defer the collection, there is very little impact to the municipality. We're still recognizing the revenue in the year that was expected, and the overall impact would be very low. So it would be fairly easy for us to implement and no impact to your budget.
So then to be clear, the 2021 contemplated tax deferral up to a maximum of $135,000, which corresponds with the currently vacant units, would be put off until the end of year?
Correct.
At which time they would be, when they were paid at that time, they would be totally current.
That's correct.
Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Marcus. I'd like to move that council defers 2021 tax collection for the vacant units in the Caris Village to a maximum value of $135,000.
Thank you. Everyone's on board with the implications of that? Very good. Any additional questions or concerns? Councillor Connick?
Thank you, Mayor Christie. I'm on board, I suppose. I guess I'm just wondering, I mean, obviously we're still in the pandemic. And clearly now we've set the precedent. This is year 2. I can't help but wonder if we'll see the same request next year and next year, even though, knock on wood, we're out of this thing. So that's my only concern with this.
I think that's a reasonable thought too. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but yeah, I got it. Certainly, the management team there would prefer that more of their units released, and this was a lower number I expect, or non-existent, but that's not where we're at. So, Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Is there not some consideration to do this for everyone anyway, to allow them to defer to December without penalty?
So
depending on the pandemic, of course, and what's happening.
So I believe that is the discussion that Councillor Hibbs was raising with her question about bylaw 379, which is our tax penalty and payment bylaw. That maybe there would be a potential broader strategy to that.
Yeah. So, because as it says currently, we did make some adjustments to the penalty structure, but we did not change quote unquote normal payment dates.
Right, there was no penalties they could defer to December 31st. No. And then there would be penalty after the 31st,
no,
correct?
That's not correct. Last year,
yeah.
This year, you reduced the normal 10% penalty that would be applied July 1st to 5%, but it still is July 1st. Again, I don't want to presume the councillor's thoughts, but I believe that was the focus of Councillor Hibbs' discussion was, is that something we want to move on? Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I certainly support this motion, but I guess I'm questioning Councillor Connick's comments. This is not the same request as 2020 because 2020 deferred taxes to 2021. They are still proposing to pay their taxes for 2021 in 2021. So this is a different request, and I think it's something we definitely want to support.
Councillor Jacobson?
Yeah, I also support this. And I seem to recall that their previous request was for tax forgiveness.
Yes, the original request in 2020 was for tax forgiveness or reduction related to those unleased units. The council instead extended the deferral of the payment.
Yeah, and I look forward to Councillor Hibbs' proposal on a blanket deferral. But my thought is, and I believe this is the third time that this group has come to us over the last 4 years with some sort of request for assistance. And the initial 2 times I know we have either denied them or whatever. And frankly, I've been impressed with the graciousness of their acceptance of our decision. I've never heard within my own professional community any grumbling or anything like that. So I like the fact that they didn't ask for anything other than just a little bit more time to pay here. So I'm supportive of this too.
Anyone else? Very good. We have a motion before us. It's read by Councillor Ross.
Correct.
Which corresponds with number 2 on our sheet, so everybody's got it in front of them. Any additional questions or concerns? All those in favor? You see none opposed, unanimous. Graciously waiting in the background is Director Juke to the bitter end of the request for decision. Item 5.9, the committee review report number 5. Director Juke, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Mayor Creasy and council. It's been a very interesting wait, I can tell you that. So before council tonight is the 5th in a series of committee review reports, reviewing in this case 3 regional services commissions. Just by way of reminder to everyone attending tonight about the impetus for this project, council's 2018-2021 strategic plan identified a review of boards, committees, and commissions as a measure of achieving the medium priority goal of ensuring that board and committee members understand their roles, fulfill their mandates, and provide value to the city and to residents. The project commenced just about a year ago in May of 2020, and by May this year, council will have reviewed 18 internal and external entities, including looking over their founding documents, their purpose, their funding, and the manner of city involvement with the entities. And we've made adjustments for effectiveness and efficiencies in many of the cases of the reviews. Moving on to tonight's review, specifically in front of us today, council will find that the cover request for decision document includes an overview of the regional services commissions as a way for municipalities to deliver services in the most cost-effective manner. Commissions are wholly independent and have natural person powers. They are formed and overseen by the province. In fact, they're regulated by the province, much in the same way that municipalities are. The RFD document also has a handy summary of the review of each of these commissions, which distills down the review report itself to manageable format. The RFD also proposes, of course, a resolution for council's consideration. Attached to the RFD is the review report itself, examining each of the commissions in detail. And also attached are a number of key reference documents, such as membership and services agreements, available to council through links in the in-camera section of tonight's agenda. So with that, I'll dive into the first commission in the review report, which is the Wastewater Services Commission. As with other reviews, I will pause after presenting each commission to allow discussion and direction by council if desired. The Wastewater Services Commission was formed 13 years ago together with Blackfalds and Lacombe County as the most economical means of providing wastewater services while meeting new regulatory requirements. The commission partners with the city of Red Deer to receive the effluent from the 3 municipalities. This has made our own sewage lagoon surplus, which we of course are enjoying some of the benefits of that today. The commission has a simple board structure with just 3 voting directors, each of which must, by commission bylaw, be an elected official from the member municipality. Meetings consume only about 10 hours per year and are scheduled on the same day as the Water Services Commission because the delegates happen to be the same in both commissions. The Wastewater Commission contracts with the City of Lacombe for administration and operations, resulting in 2021 in $244,000 in revenue. Through a variety of publishing methods, the Commission achieves the inform level of public engagement standards. And administration has identified 2 potential options to amend the city's involvement with the Commission. One is that the city's voting director seek a commission bylaw amendment to allow a member of city administration into the voting seat. And or we could potentially, we have the option to terminate the service contract. Administration, of course, recommends neither of these 2 amendments. So I'll just pause here and ask, does council wish to discuss either of these options for this commission?
Not seeing a lot of appetite on that question. I think we can move on to the next one, please, Director Drew.
Thank you. Moving on, the North Red Deer River Water Services Commission was formed 17 years ago by the city in partnership with Blackfalds, Ponoka and Ponoka County, and Lacombe County. It also partners with the City of Red Deer for the supply of potable water. Again, this commission has a simple board structure with 1 elected official from each member municipality as a voting director. And meetings, however, consume about 30 hours per year. In this case, board members are compensated for attendance by commission bylaw with a per diem similar to the consideration that might be given for provincial board attendance. There's some quite an equivalency there. The city provides administration and operational services to this commission for about $171,000 in revenue in 2021. Difference here is that the city must track expenses on the operations side to support its billing for services, which is quite time consuming of an administrative capacity as well. This is quite unlike our contract with the Wastewater Services Commission, which allows for a flat rate billing. This commission, like the other one, also achieves public engagement at the inform level. Administration identified 2 options to amend this city's relationship with this commission. The first is to renegotiate the management services contract to eliminate the need to track expenses, which is recommended. And as with the Wastewater Services Commission, seek a commission bylaw amendment to allow a member of administration as a delegate rather than an elected official, which is not recommended. And does council wish to ask any questions or discuss these options?
Thank you, Director Duke. Given that there's obviously some efficiencies to be recognized by not tracking every individual administrative function, I like that part, but I also, given that I sit on that board, I think there might be an expectation for perhaps a reduction in the overall amount, given that that work would not have to be accomplished. I'm not saying that that would happen, but I think that would be an expectation. So I'm all for going forward this, and would be happy to advocate on behalf of the city, because I do think that it makes good management sense not to track these, but I expect over the course of the year as many thousands of small allotments of time and whatnot. I think that's, the accounting probably represents a fairly significant portion of that time, which is unfortunate. I'm just wondering after how many years we can come up with an agreed amount and move on. Chief Gotti.
So just to be clear, we are recommending that that be something that is sought at the next reestablishment of a contract with, between the city and the commission, rather than negotiating it midterm. I think you're absolutely correct. There would be an expectation of an offsetting cost reduction for a midterm negotiation. Of course, at the time of a bid submission, it's whoever has the most successful proposition.
I do think that that's something that would be entertained by the board. It's not an unreasonable request. So with council's direction, I certainly think that that is something that we can look at. It would certainly perhaps remove a little time spent on behalf of our staff here at the city that's working for the wastewater, or for the Water Commission. And anytime we can save effort like that on somewhat of a redundant exercise, I think that would be a good thing. Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I only had a question about the current membership, because it appears to have 2 Lacombe County elected officials on it, the water services. So Barb Shepherd and Ken Wigmore. So I was just curious about.
I think that that is strictly for the purposes of
alternate?
Alternate, yes.
Okay, because there's no named alternate for Lacombe.
That may have been just a misprint.
Okay, just curious.
Just so you're aware of, just so you know, with the change in the structure, the way that in the past, the bylaws were set up such that there was a difference in the type of voting that was being done on that board. And some of it was based on an allocation of the percentage of water usage by the overall commission. That's the way that the bylaw read. However, in practice, I am certainly unaware of any time when that was exercised. Keep in mind the city consumes a significantly higher portion of the water allocation than any of the others. So that would, for all intents and purposes, with the capital items and whatnot, that basically meant that whenever the city had 54%, yeah, we had over half the vote. So it was, yeah, like I say, in practice, that was not followed. Recognizing that there were good partners there, all with input for perfectly legitimate reasons, and that has since been changed to an easier to calculate 1 vote per member.
I think it is to be, it's in the process.
Or in the process thereof. Thank you for that correction. But it was felt by the board members that was a more equitable way to go than the way that it read previously and was not followed. Anything that you'd care to add, Director Thompson?
No, sir. No, sir. Thanks for summarizing that. You're absolutely right. It's in the works, and will be presented to a commission meeting shortly. The amendments to the bylaw.
With respect to voting?
The voting.
Very good. Thank you. So with the council's direction, then we wanted to set some direction as for future contractual considerations, or how do we want to proceed with this?
Maybe direction to explore flat rate billing.
Is that something that council that feels is in our best interest to try and reduce some of the administrative billing burdens? Councillor Goldson?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Absolutely. If we can make it simpler and and still recover our costs. We want to make sure that our costs are being recovered. And if you feel comfortable with that process, I think that would be a reasonable thing to do.
Anyone else? Perhaps better structure that in the form of a motion than maybe not. Is that what you'd like to see here?
Yes, I think Director Jupe may have some help for us on that.
Very good. Director Jupe?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that is actually how the resolution that's recommended tonight is structured to capture that.
Thank you for that. I had missed the specific wording on that, but if someone would care to make
I'll make
an
the
appropriate
motion
motion.
if I can find it.
So I'll just clarify, Mayor Creasy, if I may, that the resolution that we're recommending tonight will capture the entire report, and which is to accept as information with note made of the advocacy recommendations that are made in the report.
Okay. Not specifically for each commission, however, we did one for the wastewater. You go ahead.
Well, I'll make that motion that council accepts the council committee's review report number 5 as information with note made of the recommended future advocacy.
Which will include what we discussed.
Yeah, which will include our discussion of
fair enough
payments.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? All those in favor? Oh, just a minute, one moment. Councilor Hickshaw?
Third report.
We have not. We voted on the first one, however, so we're going to do all 3 now.
Okay,
In case there's some differences, this way it keeps it pretty clean.
okay.
So with respect to the Water Commission as opposed to Wastewater Commission, the North Red Deer Water Commission, Services Commission, all those in favor? Very good. That is unanimous. Thank you. And next up, Director Jupe.
Well, thank you, Mayor Creasy. So the last commission to be reviewed tonight is the Lacombe Regional Waste Services Commission. This commission was formed 11 years ago to replace the Lacombe Regional Solid Waste Authority, which interestingly was an example of an alternative way to provide regional services through a non-profit association. The association was disbanded at the same time that the commission was formed and assumed all of the assets, I believe, as well. The city still provides a substantial part of its solid waste management services internally with collection of waste and recyclables and transfer of this collection to the commission landfill at Prentice. But city residents also have direct access to Prentice to drop off large waste items and additional types of recyclables. The 5-member municipalities to this commission each have either 1 or 2 elected delegates to the board, depending on their population, and the marker there is 10,000 people. The commission has employees and contracts for some services, some administrative services with Lacombe County, for example, I believe possibly financial, but certainly payroll. But they do have their own employees as well. And the board has an executive committee for confidential internal matters such as HR and management of the executive director. Like other commissions, this one achieves public engagement at the inform level in particular through their website, which is somewhat designed as an information and an access point for the individual consumer. Administration identified one option to amend the city's relationship with this commission, which it does recommend, and that is that the city's delegate to the commission advocate for actions identified in the city's solid waste review implementation plan at the commission meetings. And that's the end of that review of that commission.
Thank you, Director Juke. Councilor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'm almost kind of curious, since Black Falls is within the county, as why they're not part of it, this Regional Waste Services Commission, and if so, what's to their advantage for not being part of it? Or is there private contractor tipping fees less than the Lacombe Regional Waste Services Commission?
I can't speak as to the specific reasons why they chose to opt out of the Regional Waste Services Commission. However, it's certainly not a requirement that those municipalities within the county of Lacombe are members. They're there by choice. And a few years back, Black Falls made the choice to no longer use those services. And I believe has some sort of a contractual agreement with Red Deer, the city of Red Deer. But the specific reasons, I don't know, and it wouldn't really be proper of me to bring them up anyway, but I honestly do not know what they are. One would perhaps suspect there was some financial implications, but I honestly do not know.
A separate motion for this particular one, as receive it as information, or?
Please.
Okay. Mayor Creasy, I'll make that motion that we receive the Lacombe Regional Solid Waste report as information.
Thank you. I don't believe there was any identified advocacy issues with this particular commission. We do have some ongoing changes and whatnot, but there's no specific different advocacy issues identified here. Is that correct, Director Duke?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Just the advocacy to towards some of the options and the actions identified in Lacombe Solid Waste Management Plan and Implementation Plan.
So do you want that included as part of the information then? So it's documented, or?
I think those, there's already been a resolution on the books to support those advocacy positions. And so I think this one as information is probably suitable.
Okay, so I'll make the motion that Lacombe Regional Waste Services Commission report is information.
Thank you, Councillor Ross, and appreciate you bringing that up. That's the reason why I brought out, there is some advocacy issues that we have been working on and are making positive strides, but without bringing additional ones here, I don't think it's necessary. So thank you for wording it like that. Anyone have any additional? Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I just have two process comments. I don't feel like there was the overarching motion made for all of these reviews. I don't think that motion was made unless.
You're correct, it was not.
Okay, so what CO Gowdy just referred to it, that was made, but we haven't made that overarching motion that we would, what has been recommended here for future advocacy. We didn't make that motion.
We made three separate ones, one for each.
We did not make one for the first.
Sorry, maybe I was unclear. I was saying there is a solid waste management and implementation plan, which you had previously been at a different meeting been presented with. And there was a motion in support of those advocacy positions specific to the solid waste commission, not this.
And then I have a second question to follow up. I was curious why all those documents were in camera. Are they not public domain, in the public domain?
Specifically which documents?
All the supporting in-camera documents that we received. They all appeared to be documents that are typically in the public domain. So I didn't understand why they were in camera. It's just a process question.
Yeah, so they just weren't online. Normally we can link to documents that are online already that have been redacted for public consumption if there is any problems. I doubt there was any here. But rather than the city hosting all these third-party agreements, we just put them in camera. It was just
under the heading of legal.
Yes, under the heading of legal,
which is perfectly acceptable. But great question. Thanks for bringing it up. I'm of the opinion I don't think there was any
there's nothing
thing there that probably couldn't, but given the reasons that were stated, it's certainly fine that they are. So given that we chose to address the three commissions individually, there really is no need to do an additional overarching motion here. Are you satisfied with the direction on those three items, Director Duke?
Yes, Mayor Creasy, I am.
Thank you. That concludes our request for decision portion of the agenda this evening. And we'll move into the information portion. Chief Covey, have an administrative report for us?
Did you vote on that?
I don't think we voted on it.
Is it not? I thought we did.
No, Chris is, I don't think we voted.
I'll ask,
Sorry.
We still need to vote on Councillor Ross's motion. And
I was gonna say, it's always nice to have someone who's got documentation on things going on. We appreciate it.
the motion was that council accepts the council committee's review report number 5 for the Lacombe Regional Waste Services Commission as information.
Appreciate that. Keeping me honest here. Thank you for that. If there's no additional information or comments, seeing none, I will call the question then. All those in favor? Very good. Now we can move into information. Chief Cody.
I just wanted to alert you to a notice of motion that I have received via email, as does the rest of council during this meeting. I have just only received it, so it will not be in your package. But as your procedural bylaw dictates, these notices shall be read out loud for council's information and debated at the next council meeting, being the next regular council meeting being the May 10th council meeting.
And you'd like to do that now or under the notice of motion category?
The notice of motion, I'm sorry. Thank you. Yes, the notice of motion category.
Okay, I just wondered
if
if there was a need to expedite this one or.
Thank you for that.
Very good. No problem. We're all allowed at least one tonight. I know I am. With respect to the chief administrative report, do you have anything this evening?
Yes, just one thing that I will highlight. Well, actually, a couple of things. At the time of writing this report, the community was at 87 active cases of COVID-19, then rose to 92, 104, and is currently at 134. This exponential growth actually puts Lacombe in 136, I'm sorry, in the unenviable position of being in the top 10 highest per capita active infections in the province. And so certainly I ask people to please take precautions and follow the rules that are in place. There has never been a time in Lacombe's experience during this pandemic in which the risk of transmission was higher in the community. So although I know everyone, including myself, including councillors I know, are tired, please carry that message into the community as well, that we are hoping that people will buckle down here for whatever the remaining piece is. Certainly Lacombe is at a higher risk than it's ever been before. So we continue to hold regular meetings and monitor that. We've looked at our safe work practices in the municipality to make sure we are trying to limit the chance of transmission on our own staff. And we have no further recommendations for changes to our approach at this time. The temporary patio extension program, we did attach a bit of a process that we went through. We, at the time of writing this report, had 7 temporary extensions approved. I think we have 11 now. And one of the very pleasant things about this for me is that we actually did develop a process that's repeatable and consistent between different applications that we might see and different situations that we might see. And these are all documented as well with sign-offs from both the applicant as well as their impacted neighbors where appropriate. And so actually this process, as much as it was a bit of a ad hoc and expedited thing, it still has been actually properly processed and documented. So I was pleased with how we rolled this out, actually, following the direction. And other than that, I have included a new section on the significant events report, that being building permits issued by the municipality over $1 million. And so I just thought I would bring those to your attention when they come up. So there we have the Burman University Library and institutional expansion at $5.3 million. That's all I have.
Thank you, Chief Gowdy. If I could, before I get to council, just verification with respect to the temporary patio permitting. I think perhaps there was initially a little confusion somewhere along the line that acceptance of or granting of the ability for businesses to implement a temporary patio would somehow be in jeopardy should regulations come back whereby they could utilize their indoor facility. And I think that it was definitely council's understanding that it was for the patio season, which I believe lasts until mid-October, October 15th. Is that the way that we're operating it now?
Yes, staff, and that was my impression as well, and then staff are of that understanding as well.
Okay, because it was just a little bit of a hiccup, and there were some questions asked, and I just wanted it, because it is public, if anybody's watching, that it is for the entire year. I think it was council's expectation that even with us removing roadblocks for the businesses that are in a position to be able to increase their seating capacity by having a temporary patio. It still doesn't come for free. There would have to be some investment on their part, however that may be. And it was an expectation that they would be allowed to utilize that for the complete year. The complete patio season year, which is till mid-October. So just wanted to make that perfectly clear to the public. Hopefully I haven't confused it more than not. Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'm also curious about that patio extension. There is some expectation that they will make some investment though, right? Are we providing everything to them, like as far as the barricades and all of that is all city stuff, is it not?
So we have supplied some surplus road barricades for sure, not the most aesthetically appealing things. So for sure, some of the patio owners, should they choose to keep them after their opening, or I shouldn't even, should they choose to, they may make investments to replace the city's provided road barricades with something more aesthetically pleasing, for example. A lot of the temporary patios, it's entirely their equipment that they're using. There are some where we had half a dozen picnic tables that we were able to lend out. So it varies from situation to situation.
There is no requirement for them to put something that's nicer than the barricades up. They could just have it. So, and unfortunately, the comment that was made to me, it looks like a construction zone instead of a patio. You know, and I agree that if we're making these concessions, I wonder if there shouldn't be some sort of requirement for investment. I know it might be hard now, but it might have been an oversight on our part to make it more aesthetic.
So I don't know that I would say oversight. The city is in the business of construction, roadway management, not patio establishments. As I recall, Councillor Ross's original motion did include an approval, a budget approval to purchase some more aesthetically pleasing items, and that was not supported at that time. So we have made do with what we have in inventory. I would be happy to supply better.
No, what I'm saying is that we shouldn't be supplying that the business should be making some investment into the patio to make it better instead of utilizing our barricades only for 7 or 8 months.
Yeah, given that the granting of these was temporary, personally, I don't find temporary barricades to be an issue. Are they the most aesthetically pleasing thing in the world? I don't think anybody would have a hard time suggesting that. But to force a business to put in better ones, I don't know that that's going to be received very well. And likewise, the city paying for them, I don't think will be over greatly either. So point taken, I agree, they're going to look great, but somewhat desperate times, I think that we can make do for one season, and I expect that the ones that are the businesses that are making use of it are very grateful that they're able to do so. So until something different comes along, that's kind of where it's at for the time being anyway. I saw a hand up, Councillor Hoekstra.
I just have a question about CEO Gaudi's report, the Canada Summer Jobs Grants. How many weeks are those seasonal positions? Do you know?
Is that information you would like me to return for?
I wouldn't mind knowing, because I've been hearing everybody's been cut. They get their positions, but they don't get their full 14 weeks or, it's just a curious thing.
We're at, this is like in general for the Canada Summer Jobs Grant Program.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I see.
Should be a relatively easy exercise to.
Yeah, I don't have it right in front of me.
It's just a curious, it's just personal.
I have one other question regarding the meter replacement program. Have you solved all the issues as far as access? Like, weren't you having trouble getting into some of the units for replacement?
Sure.
Yeah, there were a couple. I think there's probably still some outstanding, but we are working through them. Typically, once you actually shut the water off, someone, they're pretty quick to get in touch with the city if they've been using water, and if they don't, then they really haven't been using water. Is what we found.
Okay, so that you're using all the tools you have to do it.
For sure.
Good. And certainly, while there have been some procedural issues, the vast majority of people have been very cooperative, I think is a fair statement.
Yes, absolutely. People are
happy. There's definitely some.
Get the meter replaced.
And Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, I would definitely like to say thank you for how quickly the city did move on the patio, expansions, etc. I heard a lot of really positive feedback. The whole idea of that was that businesses had to lay out very little to make that happen, because of course that was the whole point, is they're stressed and strained, and we don't want to be, switching one roadblock for another roadblock. So I do really appreciate that. I did have a question, but it's clean gone right out of my mind now, so I'm gonna have to just leave it. But yeah, just really a big thanks, because I got a lot of positive feedback from just residents in general, just having that opportunity and seeing that the city was prepared to respond that quickly and be perceived as being that helpful as far as we want them to succeed. So yeah.
I have to credit our planning and development department and our economic development team, as well as our engineering staff, who all kind of banded together to make a project team quickly for it. I didn't actually have more than a minor role in getting it up and running.
Of course, but it's still a city, right? And yeah, I appreciate it.
I think it's worth noting that those types of things are definitely noticeable, because we did receive a mention from Premier Kenny during his address over it was just a simple back and forth communication that I had with one of his ministers of, I believe it was Minister McIver, Minister of Transportation. He had sent out somewhat of a blanket form to municipalities to try and work with their business community and move things along with patios specifically and red tape in general for COVID reasons. And that was on about a Wednesday after our last council meeting on Monday, and I quickly informed them that in fact we had already done that, and I would suggest that, given the rather short list of communities that were mentioned by the Premier, that we were kind of on the leading edge of that. So thanks to everyone in council for putting that through. And as Councillor Hibbs said, thank you to administration for quickly ensuring that it happened in a not totally trouble-free, but about as easy a manner as could be possibly hoped for on a somewhat of an ad hoc item. So thank you. Any more comments on, excuse me, on the CAO's report? Dry throat here. Council mailbox. Councilor Ross, we've got a couple items there. Anything?
Yeah, our looked to announce our new director, and he came from Kelowna. He's actually very pleasantly surprised, as our cost of living in Lacombe was significantly lower than Kelowna, which made the move that much more easier. So we're very excited to look forward to some community engagement and new ideas to market our community and region, collaborate together with the funding partners of the county and the city. So we're very excited at that. Lacombe Days, we're very pleasantly surprised to have some very excellent resumes come forward. But Danielle comes up with us with a lot of experience and already in some pretty significant event planning throughout central Alberta. So I look forward to that new one as well. And just a letter of response of the previous notice of motion.
Thank you. And then for the commissions, boards, and committees, we have from March 18th, the Lacombe Police Commission minutes. Councillor Hoekstra?
Sorry, can we go back to the Canada Post?
Of course we can.
I just like to make a comment that the letter concerned me a little bit, that our concerns about making these zones no parking or loading zones was the cost, because they said they would cover the cost of the paint. I don't think it was cost. And I don't know, I just wanted to make that comment, and that a 15-minute loading zone would not be amazing for both sides of the.
I passed on the results, like of a discussion of the notice of motion, that obviously council. So expression was to not take away a parking spot within all these identified areas. And I just emphasized to them, if they want to forward a letter to CO Gowdy and council, that they're free to do so. And that is what they did, and that is so much they chose.
Thanks, Councillor Ross. Appreciate your advocacy for them. Thank you. Reports. Councillor Connick. Anything you'd like to report?
Just my report is there. Thank you.
Any questions for Councillor Connick? If not, Councillor Hoekstra?
I will next meeting.
Pardon me?
No, I don't have a next.
Very good. Councillor Ross?
I don't think I pretty much highlighted some of them.
Very good.
Activities.
Councillor Jacobson? No. And Councillor Hibbs?
I have nothing.
Very good. We don't have a written report. I guess in addition to the Premier's address, one day an opportunity to meet with the Lieutenant Governor, Her Honor Salma Lakhani, and it was just a delightful conversation. I wasn't necessarily sure what to expect, and quite honestly not completely familiar with that role, but we just had I don't know, maybe an hour-long conversation, was it, Chief Gowdy? And she had an opportunity to let us know a bit about her past and whatnot, coming from some very unfortunate circumstances, leaving the the country of Uganda around the time of Idi Amin's terror throughout that area. So she had lots of interesting stories, and obviously has shaped a portion of her life and whatnot. She outlined some of her educational pursuits and whatnot, and now her family and are settled in Edmonton. She's pretty honored and excited to be our lieutenant governor. I think it's been a very unfortunate time to be in a position for someone, an outgoing person like her, who is genuinely interested in helping people through the province. To have to meet electronically doesn't necessarily garner the type of interaction that I think that she was hoping for. But we thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, or I did anyway, and anything else that you'd like to add? For that,
certainly my first opportunity to meet a lieutenant governor, and it was, like you said, actually pleasantly surprising and actually meaningful versus what I was kind of expecting.
I expect that given her duties, when things do open up a little better, I expect to have her drop by and pay us a visit. Hopefully it's at a time when council is able to join and meet everybody, but she's pleasant, knowledgeable, and certainly has the best interest of Alberta at heart. So that's really the only two items that I believe that I had to add. Was there any additional items anybody wanted to add or put forward while we're in the information portion of our agenda? If not, I think that is it for the information portion. Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I move that council receive all reports and correspondence as information.
Thank you very much. All those in favor? That's unanimous, thank you. And then we have our minutes from our previous meeting, regular meeting of council from April 12th. We had an opportunity to review those. Any omissions or revisions? Councillor Hoekstra?
I move that council accept the minutes as presented.
Thank you. One opportunity for any revisions, we're good. Okay, all those in favor? Thank you. And then we are down to notices of motion. I believe that we have one that's printed here. We do have the addition of one additional one that will be 8.2. First off, Councillor Hoekstra from our April 12th meeting. Would you care to address your notice of motion?
I'll make the motion that council directs administration to approach Lacombe District FCSS to complete phase 2 of the social master plan for the city of Lacombe. And my comments associated with it, it is purposely not directive how that's supposed to look. I think we just need to approach them and see if they are open to potentially receiving the funding and holding the contract to oversee the next stage of the plan, because the desire is there, and I feel strongly that we should support them to help that plan be in place for our city.
Thank you. Councillor Hibbs?
I just have a question for time frame, because of course the concern in the past was that this is COVID times and it's a hard thing to do that. So do you have sort of further direction as to what you'd like for timing for that?
May I speak to that? Yeah. May I respond? Yeah.
Certainly.
I guess I felt that I brought that up quite clearly in my response at both meetings that we addressed the plan. And they have expressed their desire to be creative, that they will make connections with people, and that they feel that there aren't truly greatly different issues now because of the pandemic. So they are the experts we as a city want to support them to do their work. And so I just encourage us to hand it over to them and see that they do it. I did pass on the comment that the comment was made that there was so much more reaction and support to DARP at the last meeting than the presentation we had for the social master plan. And I said that was because there was huge community involvement. And that's what was lacking in the social master plan proposals. So I think there's just going to be an effort made to do it in the best way they can possible. But ultimately, it's their tool. And so when we put it in their hands, they can do it in the best way they can.
Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Thank you for that answer. I do appreciate that, and I accept that as a perfectly good answer. They would know, being close to that. I will be in support of this motion. That was really my only concern, was just the COVID thing and the timing. Because honestly, assuming that they are willing to take this on, I think that actually could be a really good thing, because you got an organization within our community that deals with this kind of thing on a regular basis. So it already has a little bit of a finger on the pulse. I think that this will only help their existing programming even be that much better, because now you're kind of diving into sort of greater needs, and it might even potentially focus some of the stuff that they're doing. You might see changes in what they're doing in response to this. So I think overall it's kind of a win-win-win. I am excited about a social master plan, always have been. It's just a matter of, you start getting a little bit, I don't know, jaded with these studies and reports being done, and then you're like, really? Like it never seems to make what I'm expecting it to be, and maybe that's just me, I don't know. But so I'm hoping that, because it's perhaps a made in Lacombe solution, assuming again that they accept it, that I'll be willing to risk being excited about it again. So thank you for bringing forward the motion, and I will be supporting it.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. When they have the interagency meetings of community services, must be 10 or 15 groups there that are all active. I forget if that once a month, the interagency. So I'm hoping it just doesn't benefit FCSS. There's many different groups that I think can take advantage of this, and I agree. You just hope that it's very thoroughly, properly done to benefit all, and I think that's what everybody's goal is. And so,
Councillor Jacobson.
Again, I support everything about this, just except for the timing, honestly, because I'm sorry, Councillor Hoekstra, I want to support you on this, but I don't see how anything right now is not going to be done without being done through the lens of COVID. Like everybody, whatever anybody says, they're always looking through that right now. And frankly, there's also an overarching tendency right now of people I find in my discussions, for a clear expectation that government's going to support them in very well, because that's literally what they've been weaned to expect for the last 18 months. And I would be very concerned that any report that was done would not only be reflective of what's going on with COVID, but then that bias that all the parties, stakeholders that were involved, we're going to have that elevated level of expectation for that. So I'm very much in support of FCSS doing this and quarterbacking that. But I still stand by the original assessment, notwithstanding the lack of, the lack of bespoke nature for the previous one, but that this is not the right time to do that.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I support this also, other than I'm not 100% sure FCSS is it able to do it. I mean, that'll be up to them to decide that, I guess. The other thing is, I took your advice and I looked at St. Albert's. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, you could plug that into us right now, pretty much. I mean, people are people all over the province. They're a bedroom community. I think that their consultation with their citizens, they only had 600 out of what, 120,000, 130,000 people. So they had 600 respondents to their survey. I thought that was really a low number. So I don't think it's going to be really hard, and I agree with Councillor Jacobson that at this time it's going to be hard to get that, I think, community engagement that is not being skewed by COVID. We need to be more of what the real people's needs are under normal circumstances. So I do agree with that, but I think I will vote for this motion to take it to them and to have and see if FCSS feel they can do it a good job.
So, like a few of you, the report came about for very good reasons and good intention. We were less than impressed with the initial run. I think there's a few other factors that are in play here, and given that we've got a executive director who will be completing her tenure within this year, I understand, and they will also be replacing most, if not all, of the board this year, I'm led to believe.
Few.
I guess that compounded on top of the, I even hate saying the word anymore, of the pandemic situation. I just don't see that this is going to be successful. I think that we've got some very excellent people involved with FCSS, but quite frankly, if some sort of a report like this is going to be in their best interest now, there was nothing stopping them from doing it for the last several years. If they genuinely had the ability to, or the desire to do this type of an undertaking, and that's not a slight at them, but the fact is they come here each and every year to report to council, outline the great work that they do, and we're happy to hear about it. But this has not been at the forefront of any of their discussions, and I just think that it's a little unrealistic of us to expect an agency who theoretically, depending on what comes out of it, has probably more to gain than most from what goes into it. I just don't see this as being the right approach, but even more so, the timing is just extremely poor, in my opinion. So I'm, in as much as I like the idea of a report that quantifies and outlines the social services that are available to our citizens, I cannot support this at this time. Councillor Connick?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I just want to echo the comments made from two individuals, yourself and Councillor Jacobson. I would agree with Councillor Jacobson. I think the timing is not the best. The intentions are, but the timing, as he had mentioned, will taint the results of this, I think, whatever may come out of it. And I would echo your comments. I have no disrespect for FCSS. They're a wonderful organization. They do great work. But there's a reason why I think this work needs to be done by an outside consultant. Unfortunately, the first consultant hired dropped the ball and didn't do a very good job. I don't think this should go back to FCSS. I think another consultant should be brought in. You need an outside perspective on something like this, I think. And I'm not saying that FCSS would tailor as you had mentioned, tailor the results of this to suit them, but I think it's really important and advantageous to have an outside consultant carry out this work and to look at all agencies within the column. So that worries me a little bit by throwing it in their lap. You know, are they capable? Can they do it? Sure. But I don't want us to miss anything. I think sometimes it's really important that we have outside eyes on some of these consultations, however expensive they may be. I think that's always prudent when you're undertaking something of this scale.
Thank you. Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. So I guess this is where my vagueness maybe is in error. I guess I anticipated them overseeing a contractor to do this. They wouldn't have the personnel who could do this themselves, but that they would have a very hands-on oversight to whoever they would hire to do this second phase. But that's why I just wanted them first, my motion was speaking to, are they even wanting to be that actively involved? That was the purpose of this motion. I appreciate everybody's comments because basically you're saying exactly what I said at the January meeting. I was highly concerned about the report, the timing. I think that I'm hopeful that we're moving into a time that they can have more direct contact with the citizens. And that's the only thing why I said to Councillor Bullockson that it's not quite St. Albert. We need to have Joe Citizen in this report and that we really see Lacombe. But I just wanted administration to approach them and then what that would look like going forward. I was imagining that they would get the money to hire a contractor too, and they would oversee it.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I will kind of expand on what Councillor Hoekstra is saying. I think that would be the intention of FCSS would be collaboratively with consultation with CO Gaudi, Deb Juke, that FCSS may coordinate the second phase, but I think we'll be still in communication, in the best interest of communication with the city since the city is funding it. And I also believe that FCSS is in a good position that we could possibly top up the funds available to do it right, because I don't see FCSS having the staff or the expertise to do the actual study. I see that FCSS will be part of coordinating it, and I could see further communication with city administration to set this up to deliver it to succeed. And I guess in some comments, this is not timing. I guess you could kind of flip it. Like really, this could be an opportunity that really, as the past 14 months now or 13 months since the pandemic and so forth, there's been a lot of challenging situations that might be learning opportunities as far as not only the concern of everybody's well-being in terms of their physical health, but mental health, delivering of services. It's kind of expanded some needs in different areas. The FCSS has had to even consult for mental health because of the need. So there might be some advantage to refer to the pandemic of how it's affected our community and all the other agencies that are delivering social services. So I think it's the full intention to make this succeed. It's always been a high priority. And I think it would be a template for all of the agencies to, so I echo everybody's concerns. Absolutely. Were we disappointed in the first report because we're hesitant of actually wanting far better information from several different studies across our time on council? Absolutely. But I think FCSS has a passion for it, even for the rest of the agencies to take advantage of this as well. So I don't think it's not taken lightly. So
certainly no one's doubting in this room their desire to do the best for their community. I guess I'm a little more confused now than ever. So basically we're saying it was an implementation issue. So basically all we want is a different contractor, but we're going to go through FCSS to do it. This is just, I'm rather confused now. Councillor Jacobson.
Thank you, and thank you for those clarifying comments. Now I feel even more against it. I'm sorry, because I genuinely like to support. But I'll be frank with you. My concern now is that if this plan were to go forward like this is something that would be referred to by future councils for however many years it would be in effect. And FCSS is not a disinterested third party. Simple as that. I mean, they're whether or not they're aware, but there is a bias inherent in them to have a study that's done that crafts information in such a way that's obviously going to be favorable if they want to do down the road, right? Whether they're aware of that or not. Again, I'm not suggesting they would actively do that, but yeah. So if the intention was to filter it through them and have them be the contractor, but I would definitely feel very uncomfortable about that for sure.
Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. One further clarifying question. So this motion is just essentially asking the city to approach FCSS if they're even interested in participating in completing phase 2 of the social master plan. Them saying, yes, we are, does not necessarily mean that we now suddenly have a contract that we are just gonna willy-nilly like have at her. Like, if I assume that would require a proposal then to come forward to council. And so I think at that time would be the time to judge the merits of whatever the proposal is, for example. So again, I will continue to support this motion because I think it gets us to a step and we can have that discussion. And if we decide that it is unacceptable, then we say it's unacceptable. We tried, we got creative, and then we just, I guess, put it to bed for a little while. So I guess I would just make those comments.
And you think it's reasonable to expect a different outcome for a request for proposal than the previous one that was given out to interested parties?
Yes,
in the province?
I do.
Very interesting. Anyone else? Councillor Hoekstra.
So one last comment. I appreciate what everybody's saying, and I'm conflicted myself, interestingly, but Councillor Jason was saying, so they potentially will formulate or influence the outcome of this plan by being that actively involved. And yeah, they potentially will. But if we heard their presentation last meeting, they very clearly said they need the plan for their strategic plan. Like, they felt they can't go forward with their own strategic plan without having this plan in place. So this plan is integral to who they are. And I guess for having worked with the agency for 15 years, they would not create a plan that would cut out all these agencies that Chris is talking, or Councillor Ross is talking about. FCSS has a very keen, they're very keenly conscious of all the other agencies in the city. And I guess, again, the desire of my motion was to have them to have a bit more of a hands-on role in the plan as it was developed and as it was reviewed and as it was critiqued, if you will. And that is, are they willing to complete, to be part of the completion of this plan? That would be my summary statement.
Anyone else? Obviously got some differences of opinion, but that's why we bring these subjects before us for discussion. So, with respect to item 8.1, the council directs the administration to approach Lacombe District FCSS to complete phase 2 of the social master plan for the city of Lacombe. Anything additional from anyone? All those in favor? Those opposed? That was 3 opposed. Councillors Connick, Jacobson, Creasy, for the record, and that item is carried. And notice of motion 8.2.
Thank you, Creasy. I've received 2 notices of motion from Councillor Hibbs during this evening's meeting, and they will both appear on the May 10th council meeting for discussion. The first is a motion that council review and discuss bylaw 381 that being the business license bylaw, with the intent of altering or eliminating business license fees at the May 25th council meeting. And so I believe that is for a first discussion of possible reviews at the May 25th council meeting. Number 2, the council direct administration to bring an amendment to bylaw 379, which is the tax penalty and payment bylaw, to defer without penalty the 2021 residential and non-residential property tax collection due date to December 31st, 2021. This would essentially eliminate tax penalties for the remainder of the year, similar to the approach council took in 2020. Both of these will appear on your May 10th agenda for further discussion and debate, and both of them, should they pass, will require a bylaw amendment, so there'll be a subsequent first reading of the bylaw at the May 25th or subsequent meetings.
Thank you. So given that the question was asked and discussed by council regarding reduction in penalties, and as you outlined, this notice of motion readdresses that. I think there may be some conflict in our own bylaws that I haven't come before council twice within 6 months, so I would like for you to also to look into that, just to make sure that we are not doing anything improper.
I will do so, but the bylaw you reviewed tonight was the tax rate bylaw, the annual tax rate bylaw. Bylaw 379 is the tax penalty and payment bylaw, and so the last time that one would have been addressed would have been, oh, you could be correct. I'm sorry, Mayor Creasy, thank you for that. We will review that and double check.
And I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't discuss this. It's just that it just needs to be done properly, that's all. And I think that's a concern. So just look into that so that we know that we're doing business properly. And
absolutely,
thank you
for that point.
Very good. So 8.1 has been addressed, 8.2 and 8.3, I guess that'll be reflected in the minutes then, 2 separate motions.
Yes, that is correct.
Very good. And then we, basically the only other section we have is the in-camera. Or before that, let's just briefly go through the next meetings so that those are on record for the YouTube channel. Our council committee meeting, which has had an additional item, we've got listed here as 6 p.m. That has been changed, I believe, to 5:30 p.m. So have everybody make note of that, and I'm sure that the administrative assistant will be sending out calendar changes anyway, but just let's be on top of that, so it's 5:30, so we don't potentially miss an item for some of you. And that's on Monday, May the 3rd at 5:30. The next is a regular council meeting at 5 p.m. on Monday, May 10th, the following week. And then 2 weeks after that, on Monday, May 25th, is another regular council meeting, again at the regular time of 5 p.m. And the first one in June at 5 p.m. is on Monday, the 7th of June. And that, once again, is a council committee meeting. Anything else before we consider going in camera? And given that it is 8:44, it might be. Councillor Hoekstra?
Mayor Creasy, thank you, Mayor Creasy. Do we have to go in camera? Those are those attachments that I referred to earlier.
I'm not sure what else was involved, but it's just, there's an item in there. I don't think it would be prudent for us not to at least.
Okay.
It is limited to those items, but certainly it is to council's entire discretion whether you go on camera or not.
Thank you. It was perhaps an improper assumption for me to make that there might have been more to it than simply those items? If there is not, do we have any reason to consider an in-camera session? Chief Cuddy?
The only reason would be if you wanted any further information or discussion about the policy variance involved in your tax rate bylaw, or if you're satisfied to wait for a subsequent report on that matter at a later meeting.
And I will put forward the question to council. Does anybody think it would be prudent for us to have a short camera session or no? Mr. Ross, indication? I did not have anyone indicate that it is required for us to have an in-camera session. So we will not be having one. Chief Cuddy.
I'm sorry to delay things, but Legislative Coordinator Pettibone, I was wondering if you could give me your opinion on whether a notice of motion to reconsider a past decision, that being the tax penalty bylaw that was adopted December 20th, is required at this meeting. That notice of motion to reconsider requiring 5 members in favor to revisit that item, or if you would consider that a requirement for the May 10th meeting to have those 5 of 7 members agree to revisit that past decision. And I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but if it requires it tonight, we should do it tonight.
Let me just check the minutes really quickly, but I'll need a few minutes to have a look at that. So
he knows that offhand. I'm going to be some kind of scared.
You're way too long.
It has to do with a member in favor changing his mind or her mind to now oppose. So I need to look at who passed the motion in December. So just a second.
Well, I mean, even so, given that the agenda is now, I think that we owe it to council to review this properly and either include it or not include it, and a reason as to why it will not be read into the record at the further date.
Because bring a notice of motion again on another night. Like it's not that critical. Does that make sense?
It does. If there is the opportunity to have a quick vote to quell any.
Sure.
I don't think it's that big of a burning item, to be honest with you. I think that everybody wants it to be done properly, and if we have to wait to find out for a day or two, then we'll make a little bit in the next budget and move forward from there.
So here's what I've got right now. It's just as of December 7th, 2020, there was a motion made that council give third reading to bylaw 379 with amendments that the January penalty rate be reduced. And against the motion was Mayor Creasy and Councillor Jacobson, and voting for the motion was everyone else. And the motion to reconsider can be made only by an individual on the prevailing side who has changed position or view. So either Councillors Gullickson, Hibbs, Hoekstra, Connick, or Ross have to make a motion to reconsider bylaw 379.
But section 13 of the procedural bylaw says a written notice of motion to reconsider or rescind given from one meeting to the next with a minimum of 5 members voting in favor is the only way a motion, once decided, may be reversed, reconsidered, or rescinded within 1 year after the decision. So it's that phrase from one meeting to the next. Is that this meeting or is that next meeting?
I would say that there's no need being hamstrung by their own procedural bylaw, and council has the power to actually decide what they want in this matter. Because all someone has to do is motion to suspend the rules and then debate the item. So reading 13, I think it's overly restrictive in this case. It talks about rescinded within 1 year after the decision. So Give them from one meeting to the next with a minimum of 5 voting in favor. Yeah.
It's pretty clear.
It's really in council's purview to do what they want, even with respect to their procedural bylaw, if it's overly restrictive. So.
So.
Why don't you clarify?
That's why I think we should wait, but.
The six months.
Oh.
Go ahead.
One moment, please. Coordinator Pettibone, Councillor Hibbs, go ahead.
So I do in fact have a thought on this, and perhaps work with me here. So my notice of motion would be debated at the next meeting, and it's asking that we're going to direct administration to bring back an amendment outlaying what I had suggested. Should that motion pass, or I don't know which way you do it first, but I guess you would do this first, but should that motion pass, then that is saying that we do wish to reconsider it, so that you would then pass a motion saying that we wish to reconsider, whatever. I can bring that forward because I was in the whatever, it doesn't matter. Somebody can, and by passing that initial motion, it is obviously now saying that that's what we wish to do. That would be the very next motion. That would make sense. I actually forgot about that motion that we should be making. So I guess if we're going to do that at all, it would be appropriate to wait until this actual motion is debated, because if there isn't support for this motion, then there's no point in asking for a reconsideration, and certainly no point in going any further than that. So if that's acceptable.
If in fact it is debated, then we can get 5 people to vote to have it. So.
Yes, so that, I think we will double check, but that process actually makes sense, that we would debate it, and assuming there is 5 of 7 that support it, then we move ahead. And I'll double check that with Coordinator Pettibone. We will have that for you for your next meeting.
I appreciate that. Anything that we've glossed over or forgot about, Council? If not, then we would require one more motion. Councillor Hoekstra?
I move to adjourn.
Well, that was interesting.
And just under the wire, it's saying 54. Very good. All those in favor? Thank you. Thanks for your patience at home, Councillor Kotick.